WHAS 11 night team election night.
Expecting to see large crowds today. It's going to be a historic moment.
We waited 2.5 hours.
So if they're seeing a long line right now, it's just because we're seeing such a great voter turnout.
We are witnessing history. Massive lines to vote across Kentuckiana.
Votes out here. Gotta talk to voters.
Voters driven to the polls by a tight presidential race.
I feel very confident.
Kentuckians driven by the choice to give public money to private education.
We want every parent to have options.
Protect public funds for public education.
Hoosiers electing their next governor.
We've got two good choices.
Your election coverage begins right now from the WHAS 11 night team. Witnessing history, massive lines to vote across Kentuckiana. Voters driven to the polls by that tight presidential race. Kentuckians driven by the choice to give public funds to private education. Hoosiers choosing their next governor. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Doug Proffitt. From the race for the White House, Indiana governor, and Kentucky's Amendment 2, and Republicans appearing to have flipped 3 Metro Council seats. From start to finish, we have brand new coverage for you right now on the WHAS 11 night team. As the votes continue to come in across the nation here, this is where we stand at the moment. As you can see, the 48% of the vote in, Donald Trump with 53% of the vote, Kamala Harris standing at 46%. Now let's take a look at Kentucky. Donald Trump actually increased his victory from his showing in 2020, and he won tonight by 26 points. In Indiana, Donald Trump also taking a major victory there, 59% over 39%, with Kamala Harris in a tighter race there, winning by 16 points. Now to the big Kentucky amendment that drove voters to the polls as well here locally. It was Amendment number 2. You resoundingly are saying no to it tonight. The ballot measure would have allowed the General Assembly to send public funds to private schools. 64% of Kentuckians voting to kill the measure. In Metro Louisville, that vote stands at about 67% to vote no at the moment. WHAS 11's Alexandra Goldberg has been following this race closely, and she's joining us now with senior photojournalist Alyssa Newton covering the story tonight. Alexandra, you've been talking with both sides. What's the current reaction?
Doug, as you can imagine, no on 2 groups are celebrating this outcome, while supporters of the amendment say the fight isn't over. According to live results, every county in Kentucky swung towards the no vote. Now looking at percentages, about 2/3 of Kentucky voters rejected Amendment 2. Kentucky voters rejected Amendment 2.
I know that our message has resonated, our message that public funds belong to public schools.
Will Powers of the Kentucky Student Voice team says the amendment was never popular in Kentucky, and this vote proved it.
I have heard plenty of times that our public schools are not meeting the needs of our students. I have heard plenty of times that we need to do more to increase opportunity for every student. But you know what I have never heard? That the answer to that is a voucher program.
Christy Mudd, a teacher in Jefferson County, celebrating at a No on 2 watch party in New Loop.
It just really shows that we truly are supported. Our communities do support public schools, and they are advocates for public education.
Downtown at the Henry Clay Theater.
I just think what's most important is just giving the parents the right, let them choose what's best for their children. I think that's what's most important, less government and, more on the parents.
Louisville's GOP conceded.
It's a tragedy for our kids, honestly. For our parents to be able to have a choice in the schools that they go to and to be able to get the different education components that they need.
Vice Chair of the Jefferson County GOP, Charlie Bell, says the fight will continue, but the messaging has to change.
I believe that there was a fear instilled that the public school system would be bankrupt.
For now, Kentucky's constitution will remain unchanged, solidifying public dollars for public schools only. Well, it was one of the largest drivers to the polls, and now Kentuckians have answers about the future of public and private education. Live in the studio and with photojournalist Alyssa Newton, Alexandra Goldberg, WHAS 11 night team on your side. Doug.
Alexandra, thank you. Kentuckians did approve Amendment number 1 on the ballot measure you saw today. That measure cleans up language in the Kentucky Constitution and firmly prohibits non-citizens from voting in Kentucky elections. Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams has already testified that this was not happening in Kentucky anyway, but he felt it was important to clarify the language to prevent it from ever occurring. Well, the race for Indiana barely got started tonight, and then it was over. Indiana calling for the Republican who keeps the governor's office in the firm control of Republicans where it's been since 2005. Republican U.S. Senator Mike Braun will take over the seat after defeating Democrat Jennifer McCormick and Libertarian Donald Rainwater. Braun pulling in 54% of the vote, 76% of the precincts in for the state of Indiana. McCormick with 41% of the vote. Braun joining big names like Mitch Daniels and Mike Pence, the former governors, to run the state. The WHAS 11 night team is all over the story from Indianapolis. Travis Breeze just covered a tearful Jennifer McCormick concession speech. But first, we want to begin with the night team's Alex Dieterer and photojournalist Jessica Farley, who show us Braun's party and how they reacted to the early win tonight.
We're going to take Indiana to places we've never seen before.
An acceptance speech from the next governor of Indiana, Mike Braun, given to a room full of Indiana GOPs in downtown Indianapolis.
Just after 7 on election night, in an early call by the Associated Press, the Indiana GOP watch party in Indianapolis celebrated.
The referee called it. I'm going to say in the third round.
The first-term U.S. Senator beat out challengers Jennifer McCormick, the former Republican superintendent turned Democrat, and Libertarian Donald Rainwater.
And really, I can't wait to hit the ground running, taking this state to a place where they put us with Texas, Florida, Tennessee.
Braun and his now Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith will continue the 20-year Republican stronghold on the state.
It's going to be much longer than 20 years. I think we're going to see, a very long time of Republican control in the State House. And part of that is because Republicans are pushing out a message that relates to Hoosiers.
I'm going to do it in an understated way. I'm going to overperform and deliver results, and you can count on that when I hit the ground running.
As for what's next for the next Indiana governor, he said tonight that he's looking forward to taking 3 days off. In Indianapolis with photojournalist Jessica Farley, Alex Dieterer, the WHAS 11 night team on your side.
McCormick pulled major support from many in southern Indiana, choosing Terry Gooden of the well-known Gooden law enforcement family as her running mate, but it was not enough to swing the seat. WHAS 11's Travis Breeze and photojournalist Philip Merle have the goodbye tonight.
Definitely not the result that the McCormick campaign wanted. Even though the Associated Press called this race at 7 p.m., they were holding out hope for 3 more hours until 10 o'clock. Eventually, McCormick took the stage and conceded, but still said that their party has a lot to be proud of.
We will go into tomorrow knowing we still have work to do, because you know who's depending upon that? Our kids, our families, our communities, and the great state of Indiana. It has been truly my honor to represent all of you on the campaign trail.
An emotional Jennifer McCormick taking the stage and thanking her supporters. Many hoped the former Republican turned Democrat and strong supporter of public education would do better. Still, she performed better than the last Democrat to run in 2020.
I think it sends a message that women are not happy, that it's such a close race, that I hope the Republicans don't take this as a message that they just got everything.
While the Democrats will try again in 4 years, they say the work will continue every day.
This is our fight. This is our fight, Hoosiers, and this is our time, and don't let up on the momentum. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And Hoosiers, let's go.
In Indianapolis with Chief Photojournalist Philip Merle, Travis Breeze for the WHAS 11 night team on your side.
And now the hot race in southern Indiana that included the Jamie Knoll scandal appearing in the TV ads. Indiana House of Representatives District Incumbent 71, Wendy Danchester, keeps her seat against the challenger, Republican Scott Hawkins. This district covers Clarksville, Jeffersonville, and parts of Floyd County. Danchester attacked Hawkins in multiple campaign ads for accepting donations from former Clark County, Indiana Sheriff Jamie Knoll, who, of course, is now in prison for fraud. Now we want to move to the upsets of the night. Republicans have been looking to make gains into the Louisville Metro Council, and they did so tonight, picking up at least 3 seats and maintaining the ones they had. Cindy Fowler, longtime council member, lost her seat to Crystal Bass tonight, pulling in 52% of the vote. This district covering southwest Jefferson County. Again, we have 100% of the precincts reporting in this race. Meantime, longtime Metro Council member Rick Blackwell losing his seat to Jonathan Joseph by less than 100 votes. Blackwell was one of the original Metro Council members. He was first elected to the seat in 2004 and a mainstay on the council. Republican Jenny Mulvey Woolridge defeating Tyra Thomas Walker, taking over outgoing Democrat Madonna Flood's seat as well, 53% to 47% of the vote. We've got 100% of the precincts there coming in tonight. Meantime, Republican Representative Kevin Bratcher, he's leaving his seat in the State House, and he's joining Metro Council there, defeating Rashawn Crawley with 61% of the vote. Kevin Bratcher said he thought his voice could be heard and more powerful in the Metro Council. And in a tight race, says Republican Scott Reed will keep his seat on the council after being challenged by Democrat Matthew Golden in Northeast Jefferson County. The biggest development in traffic area in this issue right now is right there in this district. That's the new VA hospital under construction. Now we want to take you back to early this morning. Remember it? It's been a long day, folks. Most likely you stood in line in those frustrating lines after a computer meltdown, and only Louisville stopped everything at about 10 a.m. today. State Democrats then went and filed a motion to keep the polls open until 8 o'clock, but a last-minute decision by Judge Eric Hayner stopped that motion. It didn't happen, so the polls closed at 6. WHAS11's Ian Hardwitt and photojournalist Elijah McKenzie have been following this amazing story all day today. It's been an election like we've not seen around here, Ian, in a long time or ever before. Why did the judge say no?
Doug, Judge Hayner said nobody was denied the right to vote because none of those polling locations today actually closed, even if there were long wait times. And he said the polls could not be open past 7 p.m. because that would be unconstitutional. Now, Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams, through a spokesperson, tells us tonight he doesn't believe those delays were because of human error. Voters lined up out the door at polls across Jefferson County. Anitra Beatty waited 2.5 hours at the Stephen Foster Traditional Academy polling spot on 41st Street in West Louisville.
A lot of people are becoming disgruntled. Few people are leaving, and we don't need that.
She voted in the afternoon after the Jefferson County Clerk's office had resolved their issue with check-in tablets crashing. In a statement, the Kentucky Secretary of State's office said, quote, "There was no software issue in Jefferson County, and the problem appears to be that insufficient time was allowed for the e-poll books to download the names of voters who had already cast their ballots." So we asked a spokesperson for the clerk's office.
Could the machines have been fired up earlier in the day so they could have had a head start on those 113,000?
I don't think that that's something we could have done.
Republican Metro Councilman Anthony Piagentini said the 2-hour poll extension the Kentucky Democratic Party requested was too much.
By the afternoon, that had been remedied, and at the end of the day, I think people had the opportunity to come back and get their voice heard through the ballot box.
The leader of Black Lives Matter Louisville, Chanel Helms, said even more people should vote early next time to avoid Election Day issues.
People are very emotional, and I really wish we could have got the extension, but I'm kind of glad that people were really turning out and very passionate about the race.
Again, Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams putting human error on the delays in Jefferson County, saying he'll work with local election officials and lawmakers to make sure it never happens again. I'm live in downtown Louisville. Ian Hardwitt for the WHAS 11 Night Team.
All right, Ian, excellent coverage on a story that impacted so much of us tonight. Now we are joined by the best election analysts on the air in Louisville. Been with us on election night before, Republican Iris Wilbur-Glick of IW Strategies and Democrat David Tandy of the Denton's Law Firm and former Metro Council president. So we had appears Donald Trump increased his percentage of victory in Kentucky compared to 2020. Iris, your thoughts on that?
Yes. However, when you look at Jefferson County, the performance-wise, kind of middle of the road. Overall voter participation in the presidential race increased from 16, but less than 20. And same thing goes with sort of the vote breakdown. Harris did not perform as well as Biden, performed a little bit better than Clinton, and Trump, sort of those numbers reflected the same. Did better than 16, but not as well as 20.
David, let's pick up on what could be a victory for Democrats. Amendment number 2. You had Governor Andy Beshear squarely the spokesperson for defeating Amendment number 2, which has happened tonight.
Yeah, so you could make the argument that Amendment 2 was just an overreach on the part of those who were supporting it, put it on the ballot. The focus a lot of times that when you have these constitutional amendments is on Jefferson County solely, and it fails to recognize that in the more rural counties of Kentucky, the school system is one of the larger employers in that community. So the idea of trying to take public dollars away from those public institutions, put it in the hand of private institutions that nobody knows where they're going to go or where they're going to be located, it's not a winning strategy.
The other fascinating development to me is this Metro Council development. Jefferson County GOP have really targeted these 3 races. I have the former Metro Council president sitting right here. You go back to the early days of the council. Give me your thoughts now on the Republicans increasing their seats. They don't have the majority, but they're increasing their seats.
It's essentially a reset to where we started back in 2002.
South End did it for them.
Well, yeah, South End did it. You remember in 2002, we were basically, it was a 15-11, 15-11 split. To where then if you had 3 Democrats that decided to join the Republican Party, they would make the Republicans the majority. And so there was a need there to make sure that you're working on both sides to try to make something happen. And so I think it's going back to where we were again. The thing about with Metro Council and and Metro government just in general is you start to see things they go in circles, in cycles, and where the pendulums would swing one way and it swings back another.
Let me ask Iris, your thoughts on this development.
So first of all, Louisville Republicans had great candidates this time around, despite being sort of at a disadvantage dollar-wise, worked extremely hard. And I think local issues matter, particularly down ballot races. And I think these candidates made the case for public safety and economic opportunities, for each of their districts. And so, yeah, not surprised to see them prevail, but I'm so glad to see that hard work paid off.
You've been with us all day. You're going to be back with us tomorrow at 5:30. I want to wrap up. Do you think Donald Trump's going to be the president of the United States? And when will we know who will be the president of the United States? It's going to be tomorrow, Thursday, Friday? Iris, start with you.
Hard to say right now. I mean, none of the 7 states that we're tracking right now have been able to produce real returns, so I think it's going to be a bit. Right now, I know President Trump, I think, has the edge on the popular vote. But it's just too early to tell. We're not going to turn to pumpkins tonight, so we'll continue the discussion going into tomorrow.
David?
I would tell everybody out there, as one who our firm, we represent a lot of bourbon and wine and other spirit makers out there. For the brewers out there, find your favorite adult beverage of choice, settle in, relax. It'll be a minute for us to figure out who won these races.
Sounds like something you both can agree on there tonight. All right, thank you both. We'll see you again tomorrow. Who knows? We have a lot more to talk about. Still to come, all new on the WHAS 11 team. Democrats are looking to cut into the Republican supermajority held in the Kentucky legislature. Did it happen? It's right here next. More election coverage for you as we continue here on the night team. Democrats attempted to chip away at Republican supermajority in the Kentucky House. Every seat was up for grabs in the Kentucky House. In Louisville, Ken Fleming held on to his seat in a tight race, narrowly beating Kate Farrell with 51%. Now it's increased to 54% of the vote. Again, Ken Fleming there taking the victory. Former JCPS School Bus Union President John Stovall losing his challenge for Emily Calloway's seat. Calloway with 56% of the vote. John Stovall pulling 44% of the vote, and after knocking on a lot of doors down in the PRP area. Meantime, Rachel Rourke's right now ahead, 51% of the vote, to Carrie McKeehan here at 49% of the vote. Again, we have 85% of the precincts reporting. One you saw play out on television, Susan Witten is in a race here with a tight race as well. It's been playing out with Colleen Davis. Witten now holding 51% of the vote with Colleen Davis at 49% of the vote. You see the margin there, but we do have 100% of the precincts reporting. So what does that mean for the future of the Kentucky State House and the Kentucky Senate? Our senior reporter Isaiah Kim Martinez is joining us now to break down what's at stake here, the future of the legislature, what's it look like, and what's it going to mean for the future. Isaiah?
Well, Doug, we knew Republicans would stay calling the shots in the Kentucky legislature no matter what happened tonight. But Democrats hope to flip several seats, increasing their influence. Those efforts, though, despite some tight races in Louisville, largely came up short. Before tonight, this was the breakdown in the state Senate. 31 Republicans to 7 Democrats. Those 31 including the vacancy left by the late Johnny Turner, the Republican senator from Eastern Kentucky, who sadly died recently in a lawnmower accident. The election to fill his seat going to a write-in ballot. And turns out that's the only Senate race we believe, from what we're hearing, Democrats have a real chance to flip at this moment. The rest of the Senate races appear to be going to the incumbent. Not much change in the balance of power there. 30 Republicans, 7 Democrats at this hour. We'll keep an eye on Knott County. Meanwhile, the Kentucky House before the election made up of 80 Republicans and 20 Democrats, extreme Republican supermajority. And tonight, from the results so far, unchanged. 1 seat in Lexington flipping red, with another in Nicholasville just south of Lexington flipping blue. So a net zero gain for either side. Regardless, the GOP holds a strong grip in the Kentucky legislature, one that's significantly grown since former President Donald Trump was first elected in 2016, and there doesn't seem to be any signs of that slowing down. Doug.
And coming up, after record warm Election Day temperatures, we have a soaking rain on the way. I'll show you how long this rain will linger into your Wednesday morning commute. Coming up next, our Weather Impact Team forecast. Kentucky Lottery jackpots tonight. Mega Millions $303 million. Powerball $75 million.
The Kentucky Lottery. Over $5 billion in grants and scholarships.
Well, first, if you can't get enough election coverage, stay right here after the night team. ABC's live election coverage is going to continue again with David Muir and crew in New York right after this. Now let's check in with Ben. So we had wins to the point where we had to bring some of our reporters in. They couldn't stand out and do live reports. Is the rain still on the way?
Yeah, the winds of weather changes on the way. After a record high temperature up to the low 80s today, we do have that rain, that soaking rain just out to our west, now moving into Evansville near Jasper, Indiana. So that is slowly sliding our way. And the heaviest rain is going to be during the overnight hours into early tomorrow morning. So just a brief weather impact alert for your morning commute. Just be prepared for some wet conditions out the door. Maybe allow some extra time to head to your destination first thing tomorrow morning. And there you can see more of that rain stretching off to our southwest out ahead of this front. And as we look at hour by hour here with Futurecast, we'll stop at mid overnight. There might be a rumble of thunder, but no severe weather is expected with this, but we could pick up about a ½ inch to 1.5 inches of rainfall. So finally a good soaking rain after nearly a record dry October. Here comes our first real November rains. So this is 8:30 tomorrow morning, just after sunrise, and looking at some wet weather, especially over Kentucky, a little drier over Indiana. As we go into the afternoon, starting to see this rain taper off. Still some light rain and some sprinkles for some areas, especially along and south of the Bluegrass and Western Kentucky Parkway. Still mild, though. Behind this front, we're talking temperatures in the lower 70s instead of the low 80s, but still above normal for this time of the year. A little disturbance moving through as well Thursday morning. Brief period of some rain passing through before some sunshine returns, and a little bit cooler in the upper 60s for Thursday afternoon. Again, those rainfall totals fairly impressive. A little bit lighter amounts southeast, a little heavier out to the west. In general, again, talking plus or minus about 1 inch of rainfall in the ground by tomorrow morning. Here are those impressive numbers. 81, the official high today, above 80, which is the old record set back in 1975, and nearly as impressive. The low temperature this morning only dropped to 67, 5 above our normal high temperature for this time of the year, and about 24 degrees above normal for this time of the year. Still mild out there before that rain, still breezy, wind gusted around 24. So our temperatures are steady in the upper 60s and lower 70s across the area right now. That hometown forecast tonight, some showers moving in, a few heavy downpours out there, so some wet roads as we start off our Wednesday morning. Tomorrow afternoon, trending drier with highs in the upper 60s and lower 70s. So again, just a little weather impact alert there to get you ready for your wet Wednesday morning commutes. We have upper 60s, lower 70s for the rest of this week as temperatures stay steady. If you have outdoor plans this weekend, the first half of Saturday is driest. We've got rain back late Saturday and into Sunday. More coverage coming up next.
This is a night for you to stay up late. ABC News coverage coming your way right here next after the night team. But take a look. Here's the latest raw total votes for the presidential race. 51% voting, reporting right now. Precincts reporting across the country. Donald Trump 52% with the vote. Kamala Harris 47%. Electoral College stands at 230 for Donald Trump, 187 for Harris. That's the night team. We'll see you tomorrow.
Live from New York City and across the country, Election Night 2024. Here again, David Muir.
We're back now with our live coverage of the 2024 election. We want to welcome back our viewers in the rest of the country joining us for coverage across the country again at this hour. And we have another state to call, Connecticut. Vice President Kamala Harris picks up the 7 electoral votes in Connecticut. We'll take you out to Minnesota. We have a Senate race to call. Senator Amy Klobuchar, she was seeking a 4th term, very popular in her state. She's been projected the winner at this hour. She returns to the Senate for a 4th term. Big shakeup in Ohio tonight. We reported on this earlier in the evening. It was going in this direction, and Republican challenger Bernie Moreno, a businessman, Colombian-born, would be one of the wealthiest senators, and now he is. He has beaten Sherrod Brown. This was one of the most expensive congressional races in history. Sherrod Brown held on even as the tide turned in his state, became a red state. But tonight, Sherrod Brown has been defeated. Bernie Moreno becomes the next senator from Ohio. And Rachel, you're over at the board. This is a pickup.
This is a huge shakeup now, especially for Democrats and any hope that they have to sort of hang on to the majority in the Senate. Sherrod Brown faced a huge challenge of trying to build back the Democratic coalition. He didn't perform as well in counties just outside of Youngstown. This is Trumbull County. You could see he underperformed here. This is also another one where Donald Trump won. Sherrod Brown won this county, Wood County, back in 2018, not performing as well here either. Bernie Moreno was Donald Trump's choice in the primary. This now means that Donald Trump has handpicked 2 of the Ohio state senators. Of course, the other one being Senator J.D. Vance, his running mate.
All right, Rachel, thanks. We do have a state to call, and this is a big one. It's North Carolina. 16 electoral votes go to former President Donald Trump. He has won the state of North Carolina tonight. Let's get right over to Rick Klein at the board. Let's show our viewers how this played out. North Carolina now in Donald Trump's column, and we can start doing these hypotheticals, the sort of the rest of the pathway to get to 270.
Yeah, this is the first major battleground state that has been projected by ABC News. So this assumes that everything else happens the way that we expect. A big if. We haven't gotten results out of a lot of safe blue states in particular tonight. But this changes the electoral math in some very significant ways. Right now, Donald Trump is in a commanding position, not just in North Carolina, but also in Georgia. If you were to award him those 2 states, he is at 251 electoral votes. That leaves him the opportunity to win the Electoral College just with Pennsylvania. If Pennsylvania falls for him, that's enough. But let's assume that doesn't happen. Then you've got some other possibilities. We've been talking a lot about the other blue wall states, Michigan or Wisconsin. You take one of those and any other state on the map, and you've got 270. So you can do that with Michigan. You can do that with Wisconsin. Similar situation that you need a slightly bigger state than Nevada. In that case, you need Arizona to work. Once again, for Harris, it's now a vanishingly small map. The biggest opportunity still Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and it doesn't matter that she's lost North Carolina or even that she loses these others. The other possibility that could be intriguing given what we're seeing out west is that she pieces something else together. Pennsylvania is an absolute must-win at this point. No question about it. She needs to win that state. But she could win Wisconsin in addition to Arizona and Nevada and get 270 electoral votes. She could also trade Wisconsin for Michigan and end up in the same place. But this does change very significantly where things stand. Just by our 538 calculations, Donald Trump already at around a 70% chance of winning, just based on the North Carolina call, not even taking into account the other trends that we've been talking about of the kind of red shift that we've seen across so many communities in this country.
So let's drill down on Pennsylvania at this hour, because this number, the Donald Trump lead has grown, and is this a surmountable lead for the Harris campaign?
There's definitely still votes on the table where it can be made up, but it gets harder as the night goes on and as more vote comes in, because some of these places are places that Republicans will continue to pick up votes. Just looking there in Wilkes-Barre, 24,000 votes there. Donald Trump's winning that county 60-40. Lancaster, another place, another 13,000 votes there. So once you get into Philadelphia and the suburbs, it's a lot of vote that's still there. We're still talking about 250,000 votes in Philadelphia, but Kamala Harris is going to win all of them, right? She might win it by a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 margin. Then you start to chip away. The suburbs are still very big, and there's a ton of vote there. And just to add this up, that's 228, that's 200, that's 400, that's 750, 800, 900,000 votes, but they'd have to break very decisively for Harris to come through. Certainly plausible, but that doesn't take into account that there still are Republican-leading communities that are still to report, and so many of these places, as Rachel talked about before, that previously had looked a little bit bluish, are tilting to the reddish. And when you start to add things up like this and overperform, Donald Trump overperforming his numbers by 4 or 5 points in places like this, 2,000 votes, 3,000 votes there, that is really the story of the night when it comes to the maps.
Governor Christie, what do you make of Pennsylvania, what you're looking at right now?
Well, I spent a lot of time there during my time as governor, and those 900,000 votes in the collar counties in Philly are a big deal. But it just keeps getting tougher and tougher there. You got over a 200,000 vote lead now, so it gets tougher. But that part of it's not over. I look at Michigan and still see Harris in a pretty good position in Michigan. And as Ryan has said before about Wisconsin, I still think that's a jump ball. Although, look, you have to say at this point, you'd rather be Trump than Harris, given the way the map is being laid out as we sit here now. And the other thing, when you mentioned Moreno before, that's a really important seat, assuming they win Montana as well. And given the way this is moving, I think you have to assume that. The reason is that gives him 52 votes in the Senate, not 51. And if you assume that Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski might not be amenable to some of the choices a new President Trump might make for his cabinet, 51 would have been a potential problem. 52, even if he loses both of them, he gets to 50, and J.D. Vance can break the tie on any controversial cabinet members or judicial appointments. So the Moreno win in Ohio is an incredibly important governing win for Donald Trump, assuming that John Tester is beaten in Montana.
And Sherrod Brown was closer to Moreno than John Tester is to his challenger. And Martha, you've covered that race out in Montana. John Tester trying to hold on to his seat in a very red state, third-generation farmer. But it's going to be tough if you look at the rest of the map
It's going to be tough. And one of the main reasons is they've had people from outside Montana move into Montana. It's kind of like Florida. They have a whole new population in many places in Montana, even though Tester has won, he's trying for his 4th term. It's also a wild race. They have a Navy SEAL, a former Navy SEAL, running against him, Tim Sheehy, who has been very controversial because there are charges that he lied about a gunshot wound he got. A park ranger said that he had told her in 2015 that he accidentally shot himself, but he had been telling the story that he got the wound in Afghanistan. Now he is a combat decorated veteran and Navy SEAL, but that particular gunshot wound allegedly did not come from those battles.
Martha, thanks. Let's get back over to Rachel on the rest of the story for Ohio. Obviously, a lot of eyes on John Tester at this point. Yeah. But Sherrod Brown is a major win for the Republicans tonight. The fact that he's now been defeated after trying a couple of times to get him, they got him this time.
Yeah, it's a huge win. And again, David, I just want to go back to the map here because this is important. We talked about the importance of West Virginia, a state that Donald Trump won. Also, Ohio, now that we've called it for Sherrod Brown. This is basically it here in Montana. John Tester, the last statewide Democrat, as Martha just mentioned, Democrats have a razor-thin majority in the Senate. Reminder, Democrats currently holding 51 seats, Republicans holding 49, and they're playing so much defense tonight with 23 seats that they are defending. That's why all eyes are on Montana and that race. And right now, as we're waiting more vote, it's not looking good for Senator John Tester.
Let's race across the map. Can we look at Michigan, the Senate race there? It's an open seat. Debbie Stabenow retiring. Alyssa Slotkin, obviously a member of Congress who's up against Mike Rogers, also a former member of Congress, and he's got the lead.
He's got the lead. They both represented the same exact part district in Lansing right here. Let's just take a look at how they're doing compared to the top of the ticket here. This is always fascinating for us as we're talking about split ticket voting. We have Slotkin at 56%, Harris at 55%, Mike Rogers 41%, Donald Trump at 42%. This is another one that we're going to be keeping our eyes very closely peeled on as well as they make the case in this state too, David.
But overall, statewide, he's in the lead at this point.
Overall, statewide, he is in the lead by 32,000 votes. 38% of the vote in, still a little early.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, Bob Casey.
Bob Casey over in Pennsylvania. This is one where, again, White House also crossing roads with control of the Senate. Bob Casey from Scranton, very popular name here in the state. His father was a governor running against McCormick in the state. Right now, let's take a look here. You have McCormick ahead by 119,000 votes compared to Bob Casey, 81% of the vote in. Let's go ahead and do that compare as well. Let's start with Scranton as well here. You could just see, let's go back here. You could see. Yeah, they're just starting in Scranton, though, just seeing how Harris is doing here. Bob Casey, 53%, Harris at 50%. Let's see how it's doing statewide as well. Overall, Harris at 47%, Casey at 47%, Donald Trump 51%, McCormick 49%.
And so clearly Donald Trump at this point appears to be lifting Dave McCormick to a potential victory over Bob Casey. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves here tonight. Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin looking to hold on to her seat. Where does that look at this hour?
Yeah, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin looking to hold on to her seat here. She's been in public office for 40 years at this point. Let's go over to the Senate so we can see how she's doing against Eric Hovde. At this point, he is ahead by about 30,000 votes, 70% of the vote in. Let's go ahead and do that compare as well here so you can see how they're running against the top of the ticket. You have Hovde, 49%, Donald Trump at 50%. He's ahead again by 30,000 votes compared to Tammy Baldwin at 48%, Vice President Kamala Harris at 47%.
So again, we haven't called any of these races, but the portrait that you just showed is a big night for Republicans. Yes. In all of these states, it looks like Tammy Baldwin's fighting to stay alive in the Senate right now. Bob Casey fighting for his life in the Senate. And in an open seat in Michigan, Mike Rogers is in the lead at this point. John Carl, this is potentially a big night for Donald Trump and all of the Republican Senate candidates who were looking either to fill an open seat or to replace a Democratic incumbent.
Look, it's not over. A lot of votes still to count, but the trend lines are clear. And what you are seeing is potentially Donald Trump on the precipice of the greatest comeback in American political history. I mean, we've never seen anything like this. We've seen presidents lose and come back. We remember Grover Cleveland coming back, but this is...
You do.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. But
we weren't around for that. No, I'm just kidding.
But a president who left the White House the way he left, impeached for the second time, 7 members of his own party voting to convict him in the Senate, facing multiple criminal trials, indictments in 4 separate cases, convictions in the case in New York, and to face all of that, come back, recapture the Republican nomination, and be on the precipice of potentially getting back into the White House is something unlike anything we have ever seen in American history. Even with Donald Trump, we've just never seen something like this. And to see the Republicans in these races, we don't know where the House is yet. The House, we're probably going to have to wait a while, but on the precipice of potentially not just retaking the Senate, but retaking it comfortably. It gets to the question that Donald Trump would ask in the closing days at the beginning of every one of his rallies. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And as we've seen in our polling, as we've seen in the exit polls today, the resounding answer from most Americans is no. They feel they've been hit with housing costs that have been, absolutely brutal. Inflation, the rate of inflation has gone down, but eggs are still about 161% more now than they were when Joe Biden got in. Gas prices, about 50% more than when Joe Biden came into the White House. Americans are saying clearly, I mean, even before hearing the final results, we see, trend lines that they are unhappy with the stewardship of the Democrats in the White House, and this is a rejection.
And David, if I can, it really, just to double down on that, the message Kamala Harris has been trying to get out there is things are getting better. The inflation rate is going down. But the people who have suffered through this, they'll never get that money back. And voters I talked to, it was the absolute #1 issue. And they felt that they were thriving under Donald Trump. There was a young voter in Texas, a veteran, who did not vote for Donald Trump in 2020, was disgusted by things that Donald Trump had said. His name is Carl Wild, and I checked in with Carl Wild again this week, and he said, my business has gone downhill. My wife's business has gone downhill. I am voting for Donald Trump. He said, I'm still disgusted by things he said, but this is about my family. This is about our suffering through the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, no matter the explanations about why or how that happened, that is what people are feeling. I've said it tonight before. That is their truth. They have blanked out some of the things Donald Trump has said. They've normalized some of the things Donald Trump has said, but it's their kitchen table.
And when you're paying more at the grocery store, you know
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
And so that's your most immediate concern. And as you said, as you traveled through the Sun Belt states, everywhere you went, that's what they said. I want to bring in the team at 538, Galen Druk, Elliot Morris. Do we have a camera at 538, guys? I wanted to ask them, I know they're crunching the numbers. There they are. Let's see if we can find them in their cubicle back there. Hey, guys, are you back there? Are you still awake? Hey. I know you guys have been crunching the numbers here.
We got you, indeed. We are still awake.
Galen, Elliot, tell us what you're seeing in Pennsylvania at this hour. We're watching the Donald Trump lead grow. Is that something that Kamala Harris can catch up to mathematically at this point?
Yeah, I just want to lay out the math as it stands for 1 second. So here on this tool behind me, we're showing the probability of Harris or Donald Trump winning the presidency. If you consider all the projections ABC has made so far tonight, except for North Carolina, that first battleground state. But I want you to see when we assign North Carolina to Trump, for example, you see that shifts the likelihood of Trump winning the presidency to 76 out of 100 times. We also heard, of course, from the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, that he expects Trump to win Georgia. You know, we have not made that projection yet, but I just want to give you some sense of how the scenarios play out. If Georgia also ends up in Trump's column, we see that things there look quite good for him. Now, look, if Pennsylvania were in that case to then go to Kamala Harris, as you asked about, things suddenly do start to change a bit. We get closer back to 55 out of 100 scenarios Harris can win. But then Trump just needs to pick up any of these other battleground states in order to derail Harris on the path to 270. So right now, as you can see from our projections here, the scenarios that we are running, it looks quite good for Donald Trump at this point in the night. And my colleague Elliot, I think, can talk a little bit more about the outstanding vote in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, David, this might be thought of as a best case scenario for Kamala Harris at this point. One thing that this model you see here doesn't know about is the outstanding votes in Philadelphia. And what we've been seeing there and what Rick's been telling you on his great big board, looking at our benchmarks, is that Democrats just aren't hitting the turnout they need in Philadelphia. The collar counties around that city, they are going for Democrats about what Kamala Harris would need to win, but the turnout just isn't there in Philadelphia. Look, ABC News has not made any projections in these races, but from our perspective, it's just a matter of the counting.
Got it. All right. Elliot, Galen, thank you. It's an uphill climb at this point. It would seem mathematically for Kamala Harris to catch up to Donald Trump with this kind of lead in Pennsylvania, though the Harris campaign certainly isn't even acknowledging that. They've already said this is going to be a very long night or nights. I do want to call, should we call Virginia right now? ABC News can project Virginia. Mark, right? Let's move forward here. We'll project Virginia, 13 electoral votes going to Kamala Harris with 86% of the vote in. We do take note that this is later in the evening than we thought it would be to actually project Virginia, and it's 13 electoral votes for Kamala Harris, which does signal tonight, Rick Klein, what we're seeing across the board.
Yeah, just think about the fact that Harris is only going to win, well, we'll see what the final number is, but the fact that it took this long to get to it is significant. And it is worth noting right now, Donald Trump is up in all three states of the blue wall. Pennsylvania, it's a 200,000 vote margin. Michigan, it's about 100,000, and Wisconsin, it's 82,000. Now, we've also been saying throughout the night tonight and for the last couple of years that sometimes there's mirages on the map because the type of vote that's in and where it's from, and there is the possibility for this in all three states. And for similar reasons. It's because we have a large number of votes that are left in urban areas that tend to be bluer. So that's the story that we see right there in Pennsylvania. It's Philadelphia. In Michigan, It's going to be Milwaukee, a lot of vote left, as Reince has been talking about. And I'm sorry, that's in Wisconsin is Milwaukee, and in Michigan is Detroit. So lots of votes are still out there, but they would have to break in a very big way for Kamala Harris.
All right, Rick Klein at the big board, thank you. We're going to drill down on Wayne County in Michigan, actually the Arab American population, and whether or not that could make a big difference here as well. Our coverage continues. We're going to stay on these 3 states. Very close race in those 3 states between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, though Trump leads in all 3 at this hour. We're back in a moment with our ABC News live coverage. It is now midnight in the east, 9 p.m. in the west. Polls are now closed in Hawaii, 49 states in all. Alaska, the only state left. The race for president as advertised, incredibly close tonight. And at this hour, let's take a look at the battleground states we're tracking every hour here. Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes. It is a must-win state, really, for both of these campaigns. It becomes very difficult without Pennsylvania. Donald Trump with the lead at this hour, as you can see, leading by 215,000 votes in Pennsylvania. It's our understanding that the Philadelphia area could be having some votes coming in very shortly. We'll see if it's enough to make up this 215,000 vote difference between the two. It's becoming more and more difficult as the night goes on mathematically, but not impossible. Michigan, 15 electoral votes. The raw vote coming in. Donald Trump leading there, leading by about 100,000 votes in Michigan. In Wisconsin at this hour, 10 electoral votes. Kamala Harris trailing Donald Trump by about 87,000 votes in the Badger State. In Georgia, we have not called Georgia yet, though the Secretary of State in Georgia came out, held a press conference. We are not projecting this race, but he believes, given the numbers in that state, that it's insurmountable for Kamala Harris at this point. Donald Trump leading by 118,000 votes or so. In Arizona, out west tonight, 11 electoral votes, a very close race there. Look at the margin of difference between the two of them. All of these states, as you can see, close races. In Nevada, 6 electoral votes. State of Nevada at this hour, Donald Trump in the lead by about 10,000 votes in Nevada. Those are the battleground states that we're tracking. Now let's go to a state we can project at this hour. We can project that Kamala Harris will win the state of Hawaii, 4 electoral votes. So let's go to the map right now. The race to 270, Kamala Harris winning 14 states. Washington, D.C., Donald Trump, 24 states. There you see the electoral count, 189 to 230 at this hour. And as we mentioned earlier, if Pennsylvania is called one way or another, it changes the course almost entirely. Let's get right over to Rick Klein at the wall. Rick, we've called North Carolina for Donald Trump. If we want to just go back to that column you had up there a second ago, just the hypothetical. Again, just for the audience that's with us, and we're grateful because we know it's just after midnight here in the East. North Carolina called for Trump, 69.7 out of 100 chances of winning, the simulations that our team is doing, 30% chance of winning for Kamala Harris. Show us what happens with Pennsylvania really for either one.
Well, Pennsylvania puts Trump over the top at this point. I mean, there's no way anymore to see how this doesn't devastate her chances. But I want to get into what it would mean for Kamala Harris, because there still is a path left, and it would involve starting with Pennsylvania. That would balance things out a little bit as we look things over. And then there's still the possibility of Michigan and Wisconsin. But this doesn't assume at all, David, what we're seeing in the rest of the states. The overpowering position right now that we're seeing the Trump campaign in Georgia right now, leading by about 118,000 votes with 93% of the vote in. We're just not seeing a lot left in terms of where the vote can be. We still got some blue dots, but they are getting smaller. That means that there's the possibilities of making up ground in a DeKalb County. Yeah, there's votes left. There's no question, 44,000. But you got to think about maybe he nets or she nets 30,000 out of that. That gets you down maybe to 80,000, and there's still other places. That's where this math gets increasingly difficult, and that's where the fact that she is trailing in Georgia as well as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin makes this difficult to see. There's still the possibility of a Western path if she can piece together Arizona and Nevada. That could offset one of these losses, but not a Pennsylvania loss. And she would then need to be able to carry the other battlegrounds or the other blue wall states.
Forgive me for asking the question again, but this is what I think the viewers at home want to know on really both sides, Trump supporters and Harris supporters in Pennsylvania. Let's look at the math.
Yeah.
And again, revisit whether or not we think this is possible mathematically, and if the chances are slimming here for any sort of change of course here. Philadelphia, how much of the vote is left?
Yeah, well, we've seen the lead narrow a little bit as more vote comes in, I think, from the suburbs. I'll check on that in a second. We still have about 250,000 votes, about a quarter of the overall vote in the city of Philadelphia. This is overwhelmingly Harris territory, but it is less overwhelmingly so than it was for Joe Biden, and it is still below where we think she would need to be running according to the 538 benchmark. So she just isn't running up the kind of numbers. Even if she were to absolutely romp in the outstanding vote in Philadelphia, it's still going to be hard to make up that gap. Same thing in these other bluer-leaning suburbs, Chester, Montgomery, and one we're paying attention to today, Bucks is now flipped. It's now narrowly in Trump's direction, very narrowly, but this is exactly what he needed to be doing. His 538 benchmark had him at 47%. He's 2 points above that in this classic battleground suburban county.
And that's really the story of the night, at least so far, and we're getting deep into the night, is that Donald Trump ran up the margins in so many of these red counties, maybe not huge urban areas or huge populated counties, but in all of these red counties in the swing states where it truly does matter, as you know, it matters everywhere across the country. But in the swing counties, Rick, every one of those sort of benchmarks that you were showing me in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump was meeting them or just outperforming them ever so slightly, and that does add up.
Yeah, you can just kind of do a tour of the state and pick almost any county and see that he's outperforming where he was projected to need to be to win the state. Almost every place, a point or two here, a point or two there. That adds up. He's adding 25,000 votes in a smaller county near State College. Rachel talked about what it means in State College. This is a place that Kamala Harris, frankly, needed to win if she's going to be competitive. It is really the story almost everywhere, not just in the battleground states, but in the non-battleground states. And that's why we've seen a map develop tonight that saw Florida and Texas get projected very early. Iowa, despite that Des Moines Register poll, went very solidly for Donald Trump. That's looking now like it's a 13-point victory for Donald Trump. And why we're still sitting here at a little after midnight, and we don't have a projection in New Jersey. We don't have a projection in New Hampshire. Virginia just got projected a little while back. We don't have a projection in Minnesota just yet. So all these bluer states have moved a little bit red. And again, the upshot is right now Donald Trump has 4.3 million more votes than Kamala Harris. That will change. The popular vote, that will change, especially with California's vote. But that is an astounding number when you realize he lost the popular vote both times he ran. In fact, both times he was around 46, 47%. Now, if this were to hold, and it will not hold, to be clear, but he's got a shot at hitting 50%.
At hitting 50%. Reince, did you get a chance to reach out to the former president?
I talked to him a few minutes ago. He's pretty obviously excited, wanted to know how I felt about Wisconsin. I feel really good about it. And if you look at Wisconsin, what you'll see there is that the president up over 95,000 votes. And if there's going to be a ballot dump in Milwaukee, which is when they get the flash drive from all the absentee ballot early vote numbers. So I thought that the president would win by 40 or 50,000 votes once that happens. But if you look at Green Bay, what you're going to see there is that's going to be a big win for President Trump there, only about 35% in. That's going to keep coming the direction of President Trump. So, like Rick said, I mean, Kamala Harris is bleeding in every direction. The other point I want to make is that something I've been trying to argue for the past couple of weeks is that Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in 2016 went all three for Trump. In 2020, all three for Joe Biden. And one of the reasons I think that is that when you think about the undecided voter, they're the same person in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And there's a reason why these states run together. I'm not saying that's going to happen. There's a lot that go tonight. But it certainly is how it's trending, and it's just not very surprising.
I know. I think it's really interesting, Rice, and I think it comes all the way back to this central issue that we've been talking about all night long, which is the economy. And you can be told that the stock market hit 40 record highs this year, and interest rates are coming down, inflation's back down at where the Fed wants it. We're probably going to see another Fed interest rate hike in the next couple of days, even after the election. But it's how do you feel? You know, when you go to the grocery store, do you feel like you had a little more back before the pandemic? And you have more exit polling nationally and in some of the swing states, right, Lynn?
Exactly. And it goes back to what John Carl was pointing out, how Donald Trump would begin virtually every rally recently, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And what's interesting, if you look nationally, because at his rallies, obviously those are his supporters, right? And so there will be this ruckus response in agreement. But nationally, people agree. 45%, so nearly half of these American voters are saying that they're worse off now than they were 4 years ago. And then you see 30% say about the same, 24% say better. But this figure is actually worse than even in the Great Recession in 2008, when you had 42% of people saying that they were worse off than they were 4 years ago. Then when you tick through these blue wall states, Pennsylvania, 67% of voters saying the condition of the nation's economy is not so good or poor. More of the same in Michigan, 63%, not so good or poor. Wisconsin, more of the same, 66% not so good or poor. And again, it goes without saying that we've known for months now that the American people trusted Donald Trump by and large when it comes to the economy.
That's what they were saying in the polls. I do want to get to Rebecca Jarvis real quick. She's down on Wall Street. Rebecca, and you know, you and I talked about this, Rebecca, leading up to the election. This sort of, you can throw stats at people all you'd like, and I don't mean you. I mean just when we report this, because it is what it is. But you can't replace that with how people truly feel at their own family dynamic and whether or not they just remember a time when their money was going further.
Yeah, absolutely, David. You can define the economy in many different ways, whether it's jobs or stocks or growth. And you've talked about this. Those measures look very strong, but the way voters define the economy right now is on inflation. And I talk to voters all the time who are stretched. Even though inflation has come down, prices have not. And the typical American family is paying about $1,200 a month on the same goods and services as they were 3 years ago. While paychecks are up, people are stretched, and there are constant reminders of that. It's the grocery store, it's the rent check, it's child care payments. And people, when they look back 3-4 years ago and they remember paying a much lower amount, that's where they see the economy. And even to the point that Lindsay just made about the Great Recession, back then, there were bankruptcies, there were stock market collapses, there was massive worldwide calamity. The economy was in a much, much worse place in terms of the worldwide picture, and yet that was a jobs question and a foreclosures, a housing question. Not everyone lost their job back then, not everyone had their house foreclosed, but today, when you go to the gas station or you go to the grocery store, every person has that nagging issue around prices and inflation, and that has been a real deficit for Harris coming into this as the incumbent, coming from the incumbent's party.
Rebecca Jarvis here in New York with us on the state of the economy and the fact that it is a #1 issue in this election. Rebecca, thanks so much. A beautiful skyline of New York City behind you, Rebecca, on this election night. Thanks. You're getting some new data tonight about the shifts in voting across a multitude of states. And I just wonder if part of the storyline that's emerging tonight is that Kamala Harris really couldn't sort of extricate herself from the Biden administration, that this is really the Biden-Harris administration and the economy, and how a lot of voters feel about where the economy has been these last 4 years and whether or not they felt better off, you know, in the years preceding it.
Yeah, we were talking tonight about what took so long in Virginia. Virginia's looking like it's about a 4 or a 5 point race now. And if you look at where it stood in 2020, it was a 10-point race, right? So look at New York. This is actually a really good example right now. It's about 11 points, a convincing victory. Sure, that's great, but look at where New York was was last time, 23 points. We're seeing just vanishingly small margins in all these places. Even as some of these states have fallen the way you'd want, it's similar to the point that Reince Priebus was making earlier. If you think about the whole country as this spectrum, and you just shift it a little bit one way or the other, it's going to mean some of these battleground states kind of fall into their own place. It's also going to mean that red places become even redder, and blue places become a little less so. That's why you have something like this absolute romp in Florida, which was a battleground state 4 years ago. Now this is like 14, 15-point victory for Donald Trump.
Pennsylvania. Are we getting any more votes from Philadelphia?
As a matter of fact, we have. So we've been looking at the number to see what happens. And last time we checked, it was a little more like 250,000. Now it's down to 185,000. And you've seen the margin come down a little bit commensurately. But we haven't seen a huge shift, though, in Harris's numbers in terms of carrying the place. She's still a couple of points below where she would need to be, and not getting enough votes out of Philadelphia as of now, again, with about 3/4 of the vote in to potentially overcome that margin.
Let me take this over to Terry Moran. Terry, you're watching this. What Rick just showed us, it's not just the swing states or the battlegrounds. We saw it in New York State. We saw it in several states where just the margin of victory. Virginia, for example, it took us a long time to call that tonight. What do you make of this sort of redder shift this election?
Well, it's a red shift. It's really a Trump shift. You know, it's a remarkable thing he's accomplished, win or lose, and it certainly looks at this hour like he's going to win. What he's done is he has continually expanded that movement, that populist movement that he ignited the moment he came down that escalator in 2015. He got more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016. He's getting more votes now, and he is diversifying this coalition. Our exit polling data says that Hispanic voters nationally are going 53-45% Harris. That is the best showing for a Republican president among Hispanic voters, 45%, since 1976, right? He's young men. It's almost a 50-50 split. That is one of the targets that he had. He is making converts to this anti-establishment populist movement that he launched. And yes, 70% wrong track is part of it, and yes, the economy is part of it, but it's something he's done. He's realigned our politics in a way that no one has done since at least Ronald Reagan.
Terry Moran, thanks to you. We do have another state to project at this hour. ABC News can now project the state of New Mexico has been won by Vice President Kamala Harris. She picks up 5 electoral votes from New Mexico. She won in that state by a margin of about 38,000 votes. I'm sure Rick could show us perhaps what that was 4 years ago. There's been a real tightening across this map in just about every single state.
Yeah, this is what it looked like 4 years ago, 99,000 votes, 100,000 votes last time around. And so far tonight, we're looking at like 38,000 votes. Now, we know Donald Trump did a rally there in New Mexico that he said was specifically to shore up his support among those very Latino voters that Terry was talking about.
All right, we're going to get thoughts from Chris Christie on all of this as well, and go right around the room on what we're witnessing here tonight. It's coming into a bit of a clearer focus here. Very tight races in all these states, but as you know, tight races do not win the swing states. You've got to actually win them. You've got to get over the finish line. We're going to go back through each one of them, see where things stand at this hour. We'll be right back. ABC News live coverage of Election Night 2024 continues right after this.
Your voice, your vote. Election Night 2024. Live from New York City. Here again, David Muir.
Welcome back. It is great to have you with us and the whole team here all night long. Election night headquarters here in New York. Let's go right to the board. The path to 270. Kamala Harris with 194 electoral votes. Donald Trump with 230 electoral votes. Everyone now waiting to see how the blue wall will go, actually, which way the wave hits when it hits shore, I guess, because it's very close. Kamala Harris's campaign believes it still has a pathway through those 3 states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, though it is very tight and mathematically challenging at this point. Rick, something you've noticed?
Yeah, we just got a couple more votes, another big chunk of votes out of Delaware County, Delco. This is a heavily Harris county, and we're seeing her do fairly well there, but not quite at the 538 benchmark, which is problematic in a close one. We're down to a 160,000 vote margin. We still think there's lots of votes out there, and if you're poking around, we're still waiting on Philadelphia, the 177,000 votes expected there, 120,000 votes in Montgomery, another 60,000 in Chester. That's where I've focused a lot of attention, but there's still some Republican areas that are outstanding. Johnstown, which is an area that is going to go a lot redder, almost certainly. Right now, they've got about 58,000 votes, too. So it's kind of one step forward, two steps back, potentially, as Harris tries to make up ground.
Show us Michigan. What do you got?
Yeah, Michigan is really not going to come into clear focus until we see a lot more out of Detroit, out of Wayne County. Wayne County is the biggest in the state. It's also really where the Democrats vote. It's also home to Dearborn, which we know has had kind of a lukewarm reception to Kamala Harris and to Joe Biden both. Right now, she's only netting 36,000 votes out of Wayne County. That's obviously going to go up quite a bit. We'd expect that it has to, but. Well, we just saw a little jump in the vote here that changes some of the numbers. It gets it down to 160,000. So that's going to take a while based on our reporting. But really, we're just waiting on the urban areas in all three of those big battlegrounds.
And Wisconsin, where are we now?
Yeah, Wisconsin right now is a 96,000 vote margin, and Milwaukee is just going to be the one that we're waiting on so much. 190,000 votes in Milwaukee alone. As we've been talking about tonight, you can make up some of the ground, but it's hard to make up big chunks because Donald Trump will net some votes there as well as in other parts of the state.
Chris Christie, what do you make of what you're seeing here?
Well, look, I think there's a few things to look at tonight. The first one is I got asked this morning by George on Good Morning America about these conflicting poll numbers, and the 72% saying we're on the wrong track versus the 60% unfavorable for Donald Trump, and which one was going to govern. And I think what we're seeing tonight is wrong track governed over his unfavorables. They don't like him, but they trust him on some of those issues more. And secondly, for Kamala Harris, she had to come up with a more imaginative campaign to what she did. And here's the thing. Joe Biden gotten out a year ago. This might be a totally different race. He's got to be thinking about that tonight.
It's the beginning of a bigger conversation we're going to have probably right after this break. We'll be back with much more. ABC News Live coverage continues here in a moment.
Welcome back to Election Night 2024 on ABC. Here again, David Muir.
Hello again, everyone. We're so glad you're with us now. 12:30 here in the East. Welcome back. This is the road to 270 here. As you can see, Kamala Harris with 194 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 230 electoral votes. Of course, the blue wall, the Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, all still too close to call. We're also tracking Nevada and Arizona. And we also want to go to Whit Johnson, who has some late reporting from the Trump campaign. Whit, I would gather the Trump campaign is very happy with what they're seeing. And we heard from Reince here a short time ago that Donald Trump himself extraordinarily pleased with how the night's gone.
That's right, David. The party is really energized here tonight. A lot of confidence in the room. And a Trump campaign spokesperson tells us that the former president is actually on his way right now to the convention center where we are from Mar-a-Lago. We don't have exact timing on when he might speak tonight, but I just checked. It's about a 4-mile drive, maybe about 12 minutes without traffic. So we know that he's on his way. He's in the motorcade, and we're expecting to get some more guidance from the campaign shortly. But you mentioned the energy in the room. People here very excited. It's become kind of the who's who in the room right now with people like Senator Marco Rubio, Doug Burgum, both potential cabinet picks in a potential new Trump administration. We also saw Rudy Giuliani here. And Rubio, as he was walking out, my colleague Jay O'Brien here tried to grab him to ask him how he was feeling. Senator Rubio said, "We always knew it was going to be a good night for Trump, but we didn't expect it would actually move this quickly." So again, a lot of confidence here. We're also getting more information about what the event was like at Mar-a-Lago tonight. And there's actually another photograph here. This is of former President Donald Trump speaking with Elon Musk and UFC President Dana White. If you can take a look at that photo here, this from a post on X by Elon Musk. So you can see that was that one of those more private gatherings that were taking place at Mar-a-Lago, what was described as sort of a war room there with the former president, some of his friends, colleagues, top donors and top advisors and family members. But now, once again, as we're told, the former president is on his way here to West Palm Beach. David.
All right, Whit Johnson in West Palm Beach tonight. Whit, as soon as he gets there, you'll let us know. Let's go over to Eva Pilgrim. She's in Washington, D.C., Howard University. Eva, I gather the temperature of the evening has shifted there.
Quite remarkably, very different than what Whit is seeing there at the Trump campaign. You can see this was a very crowded area just a short time ago, when we last came to you. The crowd is leaving. They have been leaving for some time now. And, you know, the campaign is telling us that they still think that there is a chance that they can hold that blue wall. But there are a lot of nerves and a lot of reservations that people are having. We heard Whit talking about the fact that the former president is on his way to his campaign event. At last check just a moment ago, the vice president is still at the Naval Conservatory, which is the vice president's residence here in D.C., is not on her way here. And as you watch that crowd there shifting away, I mean, it has become dramatically smaller. People just waiting. We've heard repeatedly from the campaign that to tell staffers to go home, that they are not anticipating a result tonight, to get some sleep. But a major vibe shift here. I had one Democratic source tell me that the vibe is not good. And this is brutal for them, David.
Eva Pilgrim at Howard University tonight in Washington, D.C. Eva, thanks to you. We're going to focus here for a moment on Arizona. We haven't taken a lot of time yet to dig into the numbers that we have so far on Arizona. They're going to ask us to pause here in a moment, Rick, so just be aware of that. That just means the rest of the country is going to rejoin us here. But in the meantime, where do things stand in Arizona?
A little more than half of the vote. Most of the vote comes right there in Maricopa County, which is Phoenix, Scottsdale. We know those retirement communities. It's a battleground county. It's a county that Donald Trump carried the first time, Joe Biden the second time. Right now, Harris is up there, but just by a little bit. Looking at another battleground county out there in Yuma County, someplace that Kamala Harris needs to be getting about 45% of the vote. She's really around 35, but it's so early in terms of the vote. We think this was actually early vote from more than a week ago. We'll have to see how this goes. This becomes key to her chances. If she isn't able to win a Wisconsin or a Michigan, she will need to carry those states out west, Arizona and Nevada.
Okay. We have 15 seconds here. We're going to go to Elizabeth Schulze, who is on the ground in Arizona. Before we bring her in, we're just going to pause here in just a moment, just so that the rest of the network can join us here. Let's pause here. That's the quietest this room has been all night. Let's get to Elizabeth Schulze in Arizona. She's on the ground there. And Elizabeth, as you know, we always expected it would take some time in Arizona to get the results. What are we looking at so far, and what are they saying as far as how long we have to wait?
David, the Secretary of State told me earlier today that it could take up to 13 days for the votes to be fully counted in Arizona. And what we're seeing here in Maricopa County, they are counting those votes. They're going to be doing that 24/7, but there are still a lot of votes outstanding. And both the campaigns that we're talking to here are pointing to that for a reason for optimism. They say they've had good ground game across Arizona. It's still too early to say which way this will go. But I will say I was just talking to one official with the Arizona GOP. He says he likes what he is seeing in other states, and that bodes well for Trump here, especially when it comes to Latino voters. We are seeing Trump outperform in some of those more rural counties of Arizona that could tip him in a state that is so close. Remember, David, this race was decided by just 10,000 votes in 2020. This is expected to be tight again, and because of that, this counting will go on. It will take time. Officials here, we're talking to them, they say, be prepared to be here for the long haul, David.
Elizabeth Schulze right there in Arizona. Elizabeth, thank you. I want to bring in Lindsay. You've been diving into the exit polls for Arizona specifically. What are they saying?
And virtually every possible metric, David, Trump is outperforming himself from 2020. When you talk about women, when you talk about Latinos, those without a college degree, senior citizens, and independents. Let's look at independents in Arizona in particular. 40%, by the way, of those in Arizona identify as independent voters. Donald Trump getting the best of Kamala Harris by 4 points there. And if you take a look at by age, senior citizens, a number of retirees out there in Arizona, those who are 65 or older, which 31% of the electorate there, he's getting Kamala Harris by about, if my math is right, 8 points there. So he's getting more than half of the vote there. And if you look at his performance from 2020, he's increased by 3 points with regard to that older, that 65 and older group.
Lindsay, thanks. That's the portrait of Arizona. We have another state to call, and this is a big one, Georgia. And as we heard from the Secretary of State earlier, forecasted this moment, 16 electoral votes going to former President Donald Trump. He wins the key state of Georgia. He lost it to President Biden 4 years ago by about 11,000 votes. He was determined to win that state back. He has done exactly that tonight, a margin about 100,000 votes or so between him and Kamala Harris. This is a big win, Rick.
Yeah, it's huge, and it changes the electoral map in a very significant way now. Because if you now can put both of those southern states in the Trump column, this puts all of the pressure now on Kamala Harris to run the table in the upper Midwest. She will absolutely need to win Pennsylvania, in addition to most likely Michigan and Wisconsin. Right now, the 538 chances, just based on these states, and it doesn't take into account the margin in the other states, an 80% chance of a Trump victory. And if you're just looking at the pure math right now, if you flip Pennsylvania to Trump, that's 270 electoral votes right there. If you put this back here, give him a Wisconsin and a Michigan, that gets you to 270, or Michigan plus a Nevada. There's a lot of paths that are now open up to Donald Trump because he was able to hold those two states. One of them he won twice. The other one he won once and then gave back. And we remember that margin, 11,779. It became famous because of that recording. And it looks like tonight it's going to be a lot bigger margin than that in the state of Georgia. Right now it's 118,000 votes. There's still some votes left, but we've seen these blue dots shrink over the night. The story will be that the Atlanta area did not come through in the same kind of margins. And the redder parts of the state, as we've been discussing tonight, we just have seen Donald Trump hold his numbers and overperform his numbers in county after county, bringing his numbers to a level that, frankly, he hadn't seen before. And that to me is just a remarkable part of the story tonight, to see how many places he was able to not just do what he had done before, but build on what he had done before, to grow his vote share in county after county to add up to this win tonight in Georgia.
What do you make of this, Donna?
Well, it's clear to me that Donald Trump understood that he had to expand the electorate, he had to grow his votes, and he had to get them in early. What's happening in Georgia and in North Carolina, you have these big Democratic centers, but they would have to overperform in order to make up for what Donald Trump has been doing in the rural areas. Yeah. That's a concern now that we're looking at the blue wall. Nobody wants to go to bed at night thinking we just got the blue wall. We saw how it was cracked. It wasn't cracked because really Donald Trump didn't hit anything. Hillary kept the door open. And now we see that we have a situation where Philly's going to have to overperform, but there are red places that are still coming in Pennsylvania. And Wisconsin, Milwaukee will have to overperform. So, yeah, there may be a narrow path, but I don't know if I have my rosary beads on me.
Yeah, Reince.
This is so far, it continues the trend the wrong direction for Kamala Harris, the right direction for Donald Trump. Every one of these states is continuing to move in Donald Trump's column. This is shaping up to be a really big night, obviously, for Donald Trump. It's not just a reset. I think it's more than that. It's a realignment. This isn't a victory because of better mechanics or, Trump had a better ground game. This is a matter of people making a decision, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian in this country, that you were tired of the open border. You were tired of hearing about how the economy is great when you didn't feel it. You were tired about the sanctuary cities. You're tired about all of these things that, some of it's economic, some of it's cultural, and people are making a conscious decision in this country to say, I've had enough of this stuff that I'm hearing from this other side of the aisle, and they're completely repudiating it and going the other direction. Look, we may have 55 senators tonight. It's possible. And we still have Nevada and Arizona to go. That is an amazing evening so far.
It is a big evening. Governor Christie, what do you make of what Reince just said?
Well, part of, what Reince said about the economy and people not feeling the economy, it reminds me a lot of 1992. In 1992, George Bush 41 kept saying after the recession that he stewarded over, the economy's getting better, inflation's going down, interest rates are going down, stock market's getting better, and all that was true, but nobody felt it yet. And there is a lag. There is an 8 to 12-month lag of when these numbers start to get better to when real people start to feel it, that they have more money in their pocket. And in the end, that is something that kind of timing will be deadly for the incumbent, just deadly. And it was deadly for him. Look, that was a three-way race in 1992 that Bill Clinton only got 43% of the vote and George Bush 41 still couldn't beat him. Tonight, what Donald Trump is showing is that people still vote with their pocketbooks. That's what they were doing tonight. There are other issues that Reince mentioned as well. And don't forget about the Hispanics, David. The Hispanic vote tonight at 45% slightly beats what George W. Bush did in 2004, if it stays there. And it shows that they don't want an open border either.
And David, if I can say, the one thing that strikes out is that question, the are you better off? Well, only 24% in our exit polls said that their family's financial situation is better than it had been. And you had 45%, almost half, say that their families are worse off. If you combine that with the number who said it was about the same, over 70% said they were either worse off or the same as they were 4 years ago. So Kamala Harris is the sitting vice president. She's facing a situation where 70% of the country thinks the country is on the wrong track. And then when she is asked in the closing days of the campaign what she would have done differently from Joe Biden if she had been president, she was just vice president, what would she have done differently? And her answer is, there is not a thing that comes to mind. That may have been the single most devastating answer that she gave.
It was those words and the pause, too, because, so much of political campaigns, as you know, is the visual, it's the moment, it's the interaction. It was from The View on ABC, and it was that question. And she did pause, and it was just, in that moment, you knew that that is not what the voters who feel like the economy is issue number one, and some of the other issues that Reince previous just listed, which we know are real issues to Americans, Democrats and Republicans. And Mary, you talked about that moment, too, perhaps being one of the defining moments. She had some really great moments along the way, but that was probably one of the weakest ones.
Yeah, and I think her campaign was well aware of that, and that she never really was able to give that solid answer of how she would differentiate herself from the Biden administration. I do have one update, which is that we had expected to hear from Kamala Harris tonight. We now know a source telling us that is not going to happen. We do expect shortly Cedric Richmond, her senior advisor, to come before that watch party and tell everyone essentially to go home.
And in fact, that was the message just moments ago. Let's listen.
We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the Vice President tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation. So thank you. We believe in you. May God bless you. May God keep you. And go HU and go Harris. Thank you all.
Never an easy moment for whatever campaign has to make that announcement into the evening and say, hold on here, and we're gonna hold out hope in the early morning hours. And what a marked shift from how the campaign was feeling. And I know they thought this was going to be very close and still a challenge. Kamala Harris herself said repeatedly, we are the underdog here. But they did sense there was some wind, some momentum in these final days, did they not?
Kamala Harris herself said that the momentum was with her, and I think in part that was because of the huge crowds she was getting. I mean, I've been at almost all of these rallies in the last few days. She was pulling crowds of 20,000, 30,000 routinely in these final days. They felt that they were reaching all of those key demographics, that big, broad coalition that her campaign talked about so often, that they felt was going to really propel them across the finish line. We are not seeing that broad coalition at all showing up here tonight. In fact, quite the opposite. And There's going to be, I think, a lot of soul searching and a lot of questions in this campaign as to, what went wrong. That said, they are still, holding out hope. That's a very, somber Cedric Richmond there delivering that message. But as we heard from the campaign manager in this memo to the Harris team earlier tonight, stressing they expected this to be close. They do still see a path, but certainly not the path they were hoping for.
An extraordinarily narrow one mathematically at this point. Governor Christie, you mentioned something a few minutes back about President Biden, whether or not, obviously there'll be a lot of questions if and when this race is called. And if it doesn't go Kamala Harris's way, the obvious questions would be a lot of attention on President Biden, whether or not that decision should have been made sooner so that the Democratic Party could have looked at Kamala Harris and others and what have you. This has been a conversation we've heard before. It's just going to get more scrutiny now, given the way this night continues to proceed here. A 107-day campaign is what Kamala Harris had time to conduct here until Election Day.
Well, look, it's really hard to go from a standing stop to set up a national campaign. She had to adopt all of the Biden operatives. She didn't have time to put in. And I can tell you as a candidate, you have to go out there and work. And you've got to be able to believe that the people who are working for you have your best interests at heart and only your best interests at heart. And I'm not saying that these folks didn't, but she had no reason to necessarily believe it. They were Joe Biden's folks. But to go back to Joe Biden, because I really don't want to put this on staff. This is not staff. Joe Biden made a promise to the American people when I was sitting in this seat 4 years ago. He said, I am a transitional figure. The implication of that, David, was that he was going to serve one term because of his age and he was going to move on. And when he broke that promise, he did two things. One, he broke faith with the people who voted for him. And two, he put his party in an awful position to where they had to replace him when he put on one of the worst debate performances in presidential history, if not the worst. And so Kamala Harris had to inherit all of that. Like it or not, that's what she had to inherit, and she had to overcome it. And it appears, at least tonight, that she's not going to be able to do that. So every candidate deserves some measure of blame anytime there's a loss. But I would say this, that Joe Biden should be looking in the mirror tonight and thinking about what did he do, what did his lack of keeping his word on that central promise from 2020 do to this election tonight.
Reince? Well, first of all, I would also point a finger at the Democrat Party. I mean, they should have had an open contest. They should have let their leaders of their party pick their nominee. But I don't think it would have mattered because, like I said, the American people are choosing a path. And they're choosing the path that it will dramatically, I think, take away power from Washington, D.C. And we're going to go talk about all these issues. But the fact that Kamala Harris is going home tonight, I think, is amateur hour. You know, she has an obligation to speak. This pathway for her might be narrow, but it's also might be walking through the eye of a needle. She should say something to the people that adopted her as their nominee because they were just told by the president to do so. And she's leaving the country hanging now all night. And I think it's ridiculous and it's childish.
Well, first of all, we're a very divided country. We're very polarized. And while, I'm not sitting here excited about the returns or the results, there's still a path. There's still a path.
And we'll come back to all of you right after this. Our live coverage continues here in a moment. A slim path, but a path continues. Election night continues here in a moment, too.
For him, Kira.
Matt Gutman, thanks so much. I'm Kira Phillips. So glad you're with us tonight. I hope you'll continue to stay with ABC News. Our team is bringing you election results all throughout the night, led by our David Muir. Don't go far. Our race for the White House coverage continues.
1 a.m. now in the east, 10 p.m. here in the west. So glad you're still with us. Polls are now closed in all 50 states. The 2024 election painting quite a picture here tonight. The picture is not complete, but you'll remember about 12 hours ago when we started. It just feels that way. We were talking about the House and the Senate. That we know the House Democrats needed a net gain of 4 to take back control of the House. On the Senate side, Republicans need a net gain of 2. If President Trump, former President Trump, wins tonight, they'll just need 1 because then the vice president president would have the tie-breaking vote. So again, we laid out the stakes of control of both the Senate and the House and what both parties are trying to pull off here tonight. As far as the House is concerned, though, 16 Republicans are actually in districts that Biden won 4 years ago. They're trying to hold on. 5 Democrats are in districts running for re-election where Trump won. So trying to hold on, and a few of them have lost their seats tonight. So I hope that makes sense. Let's show you a couple of them that have switched right away. In Pennsylvania 8 tonight, the Democratic Congressman Matt Cartwright, he was seeking a 7th term. He's lost to Republican Rob Bresnahan, the construction company CEO. Bresnahan Jr. will become the new congressman. That switches to Republican. New York 22, up near Syracuse, New York, the Republican Brandon Williams was seeking a 2nd term. He was elected the same election that Biden won, trying to hold on to his seat. Now the Democrat has won in upstate New York, central New York area. John Mannion has won. He was a state senator. Now he'll represent central New York in Congress. North Carolina 6, Republican Addison McDowell wins. This was a solid switch to Republican. That was expected. North Carolina 13, Brad Knott wins in North Carolina 13. Redistricting, North Carolina 14, the Republican Tim Moore. That was expected to switch to Republican. And Alabama 2, new district. The Democrat Shamari Figures, an attorney, has won there. That was a likely switch to Democrat. It is now switched. Let's go right over to Rachel. You've been tracking this. This is your other beat. You have like 4 or 5 beats tonight. But this was the effort. Both sides were trying to hold on to seats, and some of them lost.
Exactly, David. And so we've sorted those key races that will ultimately determine control of the House here. We sorted them by poll closing time, as you can see. No really room for panic here yet among Democrats, because some of these were expected. You mentioned redistricting that happened in North Carolina. Those were obvious slips to Republicans, so much so the Democratic incumbents didn't even run there. We had our eye on Pennsylvania 8. You mentioned Matt Cartwright, 7 terms. This is a district that Donald Trump won. Ultimately, he is defeated. This is just another example about how the top of the ticket, Donald Trump doing really well in the Scranton area, also around that area as well, which is really helping carry Republicans across the finish line. Also have our eye on Ohio 9. This is Marcy Kaptur, the longest serving woman in Congress right now. She's barely hanging on here, just about over 1,000 points. And one more, David, Virginia 2, I just want to point out. I talked to Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries just yesterday, and this is a district where President Biden won. Donald Trump won 4 years earlier. Glenn Youngkin also won this district, the Republican governor of that state. You have the Republican, Jen Kagan. She's hanging on here, 21,000 votes ahead, 63% of the vote already expected in here. I point out this one, though, because this is a bellwether. Every single year, election year, this is a bellwether of just who possibly is going to hang on to majority in the House. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries told me if they do well here, it's a sign that they could be on track toward the majority.
All right. Rachel Scott, thanks so much. We're going to come back to you on the Senate in just a moment. I want to bring people up to speed on the battleground states that we're still tracking at this hour. Take a look, still too close to call. Obviously, Pennsylvania is the big prize, 19 electoral votes. The path, Kamala Harris absolutely needs to try to pull this off in Pennsylvania in order to have any kind of path left. But Donald Trump has grown his lead now to 219,000 votes in Pennsylvania. In Michigan, 15 electoral votes. You're looking at the raw vote right there. He's also ahead by about 217,000 votes in Michigan. In Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes up for grabs there. Donald Trump leads by about 116,000 votes in Wisconsin. That's the so-called blue wall, the Rust Belt. That was Kamala Harris's path to 270 tonight. It's looking extraordinarily difficult for Kamala Harris to pull this off, though the campaign is signaling we are certainly not giving up yet. Let's head out to the Sun Belt, Arizona, 11 electoral votes. We heard from Elizabeth Schulze on the ground there. Donald Trump leading by about 12,000 votes. Arizona had prepared voters that this could take some time to tally the vote. Nevada, 6 electoral votes up for grabs. And again, Donald Trump with the lead, 34,000 votes. And in Alaska tonight, 3 electoral votes. Not enough information, though Alaska has closed. As soon as we get some numbers from Alaska, we will bring that right back to you. You heard Rachel Scott talking about the House there. Democrats looking to try to take back the House. And if that were to happen, obviously, Hakeem Jeffries becomes the Speaker instead of Mike Johnson. It's just too early in the evening to know where that's all headed. The Senate, we can take a look and we can really see where the Senate is headed. If Donald Trump is on the precipice of a second presidency here, he's also looking at potentially here not only the majority in the Senate, but a bit of a mandate in the Senate as well. Let's go through some of these. Tammy Baldwin, you've got up here from Wisconsin. She's behind Eric Hovde, the businessman who had out-of-state business in California, came in and has given her a tough fight. This looks like a poll from the presidential, Kamala Harris's struggles in Wisconsin is now reflecting in the Senate race here.
Yeah, in fact, in all of these blue wall states, David, this is exactly the trend that we are seeing here. You have Hovde, who is ahead right here in this state, ahead of Tammy Baldwin. Again, she has been in public office for 40 years here, and now she is behind. Just take a look at Michigan as well. Mike Rogers ahead of Alyssa Slotkin. And even in Pennsylvania, once again, you have McCormick ahead of Bob Casey. We're seeing that this is the exact result of former President Donald Trump overperforming in these states, and now you have voters just voting right down the ballot.
And we always talk every 4 years about split ticket voters, but it's a concept that's pretty hard to wrap your head around if you're heading into the booth and you feel strongly about whoever's at the top of the ticket.
Yeah, really the only place that we are really seeing this right now on the map in a real way is right here in Arizona. This is where you have Ruben Gallego. He is running against Kari Lake, the Republican who lost the gubernatorial race just 4 years ago to Governor Katie Hobbs. It's interesting because there's really not much daylight between Kari Lake and former President Donald Trump. Both former TV stars, both didn't concede the last election that they lost. But what we're seeing here is you have people who are supporting Ruben Gallego who are not voting for Vice President Kamala Harris. Ruben Gallego and Donald Trump endorsed by the same police association. He talked about being in Phoenix and being at restaurants and people coming up to him in MAGA hats saying that they're going to be supporting him as well. So this is breaking away from some of the shifts that we are seeing. But again, for the most part, Donald Trump helping a lot of these Republican Senate candidates, especially in those blue wall states.
John Tester, can you take us out to Montana?
Yep, of course. Yeah, so Montana, remember, we did call the race. We did project the race for Sherrod Brown was defeated here in Ohio. Bernie Moreno. The other last statewide Democrat is right here in Montana. John Tester really fighting for his political life here, trying to defy the political odds. You heard Martha talk about just how much the state has changed, how you've had an influx of people move into this state. And so it's really a question of whether or not John Tester, who was born and raised here, Montana through and through, is really resonating in the same way with some of these voters. Right now, you could see that he is ahead by about 2,000 votes, only 28% of the vote-in. So we're still pretty early here.
It's early, but fairly close. But again, it's still early. One other race I wanted to ask you about, Nevada, obviously, Jackie Rosen trying to hold on. She's the incumbent Democratic senator up against Sam Brown. He seems to be helped here. He was behind in the polls, behind Jackie Rosen, so far helped by perhaps Donald Trump.
Yeah, it seems to be that way. Jackie Rosen right now ahead 4,000 votes, 48% compared to Sam Brown at 47, only 69% of the vote in so far, David.
Wow, that's extraordinary. As you look at this list of a half dozen or more Senate races that we've been tracking, about 8 of them, the majority of them look like they're leaning toward the Republican candidate, even in these races where they are longtime names in these states. Bob Casey, whose father is a former governor. I mean, this is an extraordinary night for the Republicans, John.
It is, and it also points to what Donald Trump will be looking at if he gets back into the White House. This is a Donald Trump that will be significantly, I believe, more powerful than he was the first time he got around for a number of reasons. First of all, you have a Supreme Court immunity decision that will empower him. The Supreme Court basically saying that virtually any action that can be tied to your official actions, you are immune from prosecution. Obviously, Jack Smith is fired. The federal prosecutions go away. And the Republicans, when he came into Washington, there were prominent figures in the Republican Party who were willing to stand up to him and had the standing to stand up against him. People like Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, who was the Speaker of the House when he first came in, and they're, for the most part, all gone. No more Mitt Romney. Mitch McConnell will no longer be the Republican leader in the Senate, and you have a situation where he may have the largest Republican majority that he's ever seen in the Senate, and it's a Republican majority that is a Trump Republican majority. 7 Republican senators, David, voted to convict Donald Trump in his impeachment trial over January 6th. 5 of them will be gone. 5 of them will be gone. 10 Republicans in the House voted to impeach him over January 6th. 8 of them are already gone. 2 are clinging to possible re-election. But the resistance is gone.
Let's go to Nebraska right here. Senate race. ABC News can now project that Deb Fischer will win. She'll hold on to her seat, the Republican. Are we going to put this up on the screen? Deb Fischer holds on in Nebraska. We've called that race. She faced a tough fight from Dan Osborne, the independent there. Did not say who he would caucus with. But Deb Fischer holds on to that race. I want to continue with this conversation that John Carl just started, because he's spot on by sort of if Donald Trump is elected president for a second term here, and it's still an if. John paints a picture of a lot of these established Republicans being long gone, having left Washington. This was part of the closing argument on Kamala Harris's team and her campaign, and from the vice president herself. She had help from Liz Cheney. General John Kelly, who's not political, came out and talked about what he witnessed firsthand in that administration as chief of staff. Their campaign was, if you reelect him, he will not have the guardrails. Martha, clearly that argument did not resonate with the American people here tonight.
It clearly didn't, or at least half the country, that did not resonate. Felony convictions, the call that our democracy would be over, the John Kelly statements about the military, and that former President Trump had said that they were suckers and losers, the men and women who had died during wars, all of that. Some of the voters I talked to, in fact, one of them who was very strongly for Trump and stronger than he was in 2020, stronger than he was in 2016. I said, do you have any reservations at all, January 6th? And he said, absolutely not. The more you all talk about that, the more Trump voters you will attract. So this election was not about that. But in the end, here we are. This is democracy.
Martha, thanks. We do have a major call to make at this hour, and it's the power of the Senate moving forward. It's precisely what we've just been talking about with this conversation. Republicans will take control of the Senate with that call in Nebraska. Deb Fischer holding on to her seat tonight. If Donald Trump is named the next president, he will have a Republican Senate. We do not know who will control the House, but this is significant. And now the only question is, Rachel Scott, is how strong that Republican control will be. Will he have a mandate, because the majority will be more than just a one senator majority?
Yeah, spot on. It's not a question of whether or not Republicans are going to have the majority. It's just now a question of precisely how much. This is going to be the outlook, at least where it stands right now. Republicans 51 seats, they've netted 2. Remember, that's all they needed to net by the end of the night in order to take control of the Senate. Democrats currently have 41 seats. And again, David, we talked about these key races, but I just want to emphasize one more time when we're talking about Republicans possibly expanding their majority in the Senate. Wisconsin, you have the Republican candidate ahead. Michigan, the Republican candidate ahead, and also in Pennsylvania as well.
So, Governor Chris Christie, this brings us back to what you and I were talking about earlier in the evening. That comes down to everything, including the decisions made right at the beginning of an administration about who you're going to put in the cabinet.
Oh, yeah. No, look, he's got free reign now if he wins. I mean, there's no doubt about that, because not only does he not worry about the margin nearly as much, but as John said, he elected these folks. You know, he wants their vote. He's going to call, if Dave McCormick's there, he's going to call Dave in and say, hey, Dave, you know, you wouldn't be here but for me. I need your vote on this judge, this cabinet member, this piece of legislation. Now, I also want to remind people that as someone who served 2 terms as an executive, that lasts for 2 years. Because when the midterms come in 2026, you become a lame duck. And there are things that you can still do with the power of the governorship or the presidency, but people then begin to move on. And those folks who are going to be very loyal to you in those first 2 years are going to be looking to see who's next. And so, you know, he's going to have a narrow window, a powerful window, but a narrow window. It's going to be 2 years, David, where he's going to have a chance to do what it is he wants to do with Congress. And then after that, they're going to be moving on. His own vice president may be moving on from him at that point and wanting to run for president himself. And I just say this, that's going to be something to watch. Because the first time J.D. Vance holds a fundraiser for a PAC for himself or starts to talk about running for president, it'll be interesting to see the way a new president, Donald Trump, will react to that.
Right. And by the way, this is the first time we will see Donald Trump not running for re-election, not running for election again. He declared his re-election the day he was inaugurated in 2017. And now and he saw virtually everything through the prism of what would help him win re-election. And now you see a Donald Trump and the minute he gets in, I mean, he said we have a constitution that says he can't run again. He will not be running for re-election. Astounding how that affects.
Just a reminder, he's been running for well more than a year, and Kamala
Yes.
Harris has been running for 107 days.
Yeah.
This is an extraordinary election we've all witnessed here together. Rick Klein, I know you're still drilling down on the Pennsylvania numbers to see if the math is even possible, or how narrow the path is for Kamala Harris. Does it exist still?
Oh, look, anything's possible. It's just really hard to see how you have to squint to see the path at this point. I think we've been looking at these bubbles. They've been shrinking as the night goes on because that's less and less vote, but we haven't gotten a lot of vote out of Philadelphia, 177,000 votes. But even if every single one of those votes was for Kamala Harris, she'd still be trailing Donald Trump. Similar, if you look around to the outstanding vote in Chester County, 62,000, 65,000 in Montgomery, Bucks County. A lot of these are split counties anyway. So it's very hard to see how she makes up that kind of ground. 500-something thousand votes would have to be made up across those 3 states. And there's something that's really interesting to key into in Pennsylvania. There are 2 counties on opposite sides of the state and a lot of different demographics.
Erie County, here we go,
Erie
right?
County, and I'll talk to you a little about Erie County first. Look at the numbers there. Hillary Clinton, 47%, goes up to Joe Biden. He's able to flip that county back to the Democrats, and then Harris is down a point. Our 538 benchmark said that Harris had to be doing better. Instead, it's Donald Trump up a point.
What about Northampton?
Yeah, exactly. Go to the other side of the state. You see Northampton, just east of Allentown. And this is a similar story where Donald Trump needed to get about 49.5. He got 51. Kamala Harris is a touch below where Joe Biden was. And that, to me, is the story of the night. So many communities like this, whether they're red or more purplish, where you just saw people going back to Donald Trump, back to Donald Trump's Republican Party. It had an impact down ballot, and it had an impact, a big one, at the top of the ticket when you add up these numbers across a state like Pennsylvania.
And let's go back to Terry Moran before we go to break here. Not only did they go back to Donald Trump, and in a lot of these red counties, they went back to Donald Trump and allowed him to best himself from 4 years ago, and in some cases even from 2016.
That's right, and that is a problem for the Democratic Party, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country. They make it so hard on themselves to get to 270 because they stopped competing in so many different parts of the country, primarily rural areas. And just let's take a little quick walk down political memory lane. Look at the map that's there right now. Okay, it's gonna fill in. Let's go back just a little bit in history. Okay, Bill Clinton, this was his map. All right, look at all that blue. In the South, Missouri, Arkansas, look at Iowa, Ohio, Florida, mountain states. All right, so there was Ross Perot in the race and all that. You know, George Bush comes in. He takes a lot of it back. But Barack Obama, look at all that blue. Iowa, Ohio, Florida. And then Donald Trump comes in and it looks like that, and it's going to look something like that or even more this time. And what that represents is the Democrats essentially saying, well, we can't compete in Ohio. We can't compete in Florida. We can't compete in rural areas. They did compete in rural areas. I mean, here's Wisconsin, right? And let's just take a look at what Barack Obama did there. And that's, oops, sorry. No. Got to do that. Yeah, all right. Well,
you know what?
But it was, yeah, it was
It went
something
gray.
like that. No, they competed in rural counties along the Mississippi River aggressively. Those counties went blue. They wouldn't think of going blue today. That is a question the Democratic Party has to ask, not just about rural counties, but increasingly, if you look at the demographics of this election, about Hispanic voters, about young men, about all kinds of voters that they keep hemorrhaging.
Yeah, about messaging, too, because you mentioned Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and you showed in the shading on the map that they were leaders who did break through. And Bill Clinton famously, whether he exactly said the words or not, but it's about the economy, stupid. Reince.
Well, a lot of this has to do with the messaging. I mean, populism is alive and well in America. I will say this, if Bernie Sanders were running, he'd win some of those counties.
Exactly.
He'd win some of these counties in Wisconsin and Iowa. So, look, there's a reason why we're here. I mean, the Democrats put Donald Trump on the ballot. They put all of these issues, they wanted this to be about Donald Trump. That was going to be their way of making this happen. And Donald Trump he put himself on the ballot. And people made a decision. Now, the next thing that's being talked about here is looking at the popular vote. Now, we still have a ways to go in California. I understand that. But the fact that Donald Trump right now is over 5 million votes ahead of Kamala Harris. I know that this is something that's sort of bothered President Trump over the years, that he couldn't win that popular vote. And that was it's match play. This is not stroke play. But nevertheless, the fact that we are looking at potentially Donald Trump not just having this big night and taking 5 senators plus with him, that he's looking at winning the popular vote is the mandate that Jonathan Karl was just talking about.
Well,
There's a significant drop-off of Democratic voters, and that's something that we're going to have to take a look at, not just in the so-called battleground states where all of the resources and all of the attentions and all of the surrogates and the principles, but also when you look at New York, New Jersey, which I keep looking at the governor like, come on, New Hampshire, Minnesota. I think Amy Klobuchar won. I think Kamala Harris will win Minnesota, but we shouldn't be talking about Minnesota after 1 o'clock. So there's some drop-off there that Democrats will have to assess as well.
Her running mates, the governor of Minnesota, how in the hell have they not called Minnesota when her running mate is the sitting governor of a blue state? I mean, that's extraordinary, and it also calls into question the whole choice of Tim Walz. Well, if if the sitting governor of a state that is traditionally blue has her sitting at 50.6%, I mean, he should have never left the State House.
Well, there are going to be a lot of questions about whether Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania might have been a better choice for VP pick, just based on numbers and the importance of the Keystone State. Not for me to debate, but by myself up here, but it will be a question that Politico's ask in the days ahead if Donald Trump is reelected here. I do want to take you to a picture coming from Palm Beach, Florida. They are preparing right now at this hour to hear from the former president, expected to greet those who have gathered in Palm Beach, and we will dip in and listen right after the break. ABC News live coverage of Election Night 2024 continues. Thanks to everybody here in this studio and everyone at home staying up with us. We'll be right back.
Your voice, your vote. The race for the White House. Election Night 2024 continues. Here again, David Muir.
Welcome back now, 1:25 in the morning here on the East Coast. We're glad you're still up with us. I'm David Muir in New York with the whole Powerhouse political team. We want to get right to Whit Johnson, Palm Beach Convention Center in West Palm Beach tonight, where they are awaiting Donald Trump, the former president, to speak to the crowd. And Whit, quite a night for Trump supporters and for the former president.
David, it sure is. The anticipation is mounting here. We are seeing senior staff and leadership of the Trump campaign coming into the building. The crowd is cheering as the projections are being read behind me. And I should note that they are projecting some states that we haven't quite projected just yet. But we know that Donald Trump is on his way. J.D. Vance is in the building. We've also seen Donald Trump's teleprompter guys set up the teleprompter on stage. And the former president said earlier today on the radio that he did not have a speech prepared, but if he knew that he was going to win, he would come up with something quickly. So again, we are anticipating that he should arrive here at the convention center at any moment. And to put things in perspective, remember he spoke in 2016 after 3 a.m. In 2020, it was after about 2:20 a.m. Two very different speeches. If he comes here within moments, then that'll be earlier than both of those speeches. And the Trump campaign obviously projecting a lot of confidence about where they are right now. They believe that they're going to pick off some of those other states that still remain. And depending on how this plays out, it's worth going back to that early vote, because the Trump campaign had been telling me for days and days that they were overperforming and that Kamala Harris was underperforming. Of course, we know that 2020 was an anomaly because of the pandemic, and it was unlike anything we'd ever seen before. But the Republicans had been saying that they were making these steady gains, and they insisted that on election night tonight, that Kamala Harris was going to have to make up ground and do something that no other Democratic candidate had done in a recent election. And so far, that's proven to be the case, especially in states like Georgia and North Carolina. Of course, we're awaiting some other states as we await for the president to walk in here tonight. David.
Whit Johnson, we really appreciate it. Whit Johnson in West Palm. Let's go to John Santucci, also on the ground there in Florida. And John, you've been talking to sources close to Trump. The mood and next steps here.
Well, as far as the mood, David, I can tell you from speaking to many senior sources and members of the Trump family, as they saw the returns coming in tonight, they were feeling good, they were feeling confident. Many sources I had spoken to saying they felt it on the ground, David, in the last couple of days, not only when Donald Trump was out campaigning, but when they were out campaigning themselves. We know that Donald Trump's two eldest sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, both of whom I've spoken to tonight, David, telling me that they felt it when they were out there. As Eric Trump said to me, it felt a lot like 2016 in just the last couple of days while they were out, of course referring to Donald Trump's first run for the White House. As far as what comes next, David, I mean, listen, if he is indeed successful, if this does indeed go his way, you have to imagine that we will begin talking about transition, what a Trump cabinet 2.0 would look like. We've already seen indications of what Donald Trump has said based on who's been around him. Expect not only members of the family, but folks like Elon Musk and RFK Jr. to play a big role if that is indeed to happen, David.
Have they said anything more about what RFK Jr. would do? We know that what RFK Jr. has publicly said about what Donald Trump has promised him, obviously, if he's declared the winner here tonight. But have there been any specifics floated behind the scenes as to what this could look like?
You know, David, it's interesting. It's a real divide when you talk to people within Donald Trump's inner orbit. Some say he can do whatever he wants. Others have said, well, hold on a second, we're not going to give him the run of the House. And look, for example, David, Howard Lutnick, Donald Trump's longtime friend, the billionaire, who at the moment is chairing the Trump transition. I only say at the moment because we know, and I know Governor Christie is with us tonight, we know that the Trump transition team of yesteryear went through a transition itself after the 2016 one. Lutnick came out and actually said, nah, we're not going to give him a head of HHS or head of healthcare or anything like that. So I think that's going to be a bit of a question, David, in the coming days. There's been a lot of reporting, including by us here at ABC, about different lists that have been put together. As one person said to me, Donald Trump is very superstitious, David, as we all know. He has not leaned into a transition fully, not leaned into these conversations about a list. But if he wins, you better believe that's where his attention will turn quite quickly, David.
Really appreciate it. John Santucci with great reporting here for us, John. Thanks. John Carl, you've actually talked to former President Trump today and in recent days. Does he ever go there with you?
Look, what he's told me is that it will be very different than the last time. He said that when he got elected president the first time, that he didn't know anybody, he didn't know Washington, he relied on advice, perhaps advice by people like Reince Priebus. This time, he says he knows who he wants to be there, and that means he can staff his White House and his cabinet with true loyalists this time, not people that will ultimately defy him. I have to say, I just spoke to a very senior advisor of Donald Trump's who told me, this may not shock you, but that when he comes out on that stage, he plans to declare victory, flatly declare that he has won this race. He did that, of course, in 2020, but unlike that, we haven't called it. At least he has a solid reason for coming out and saying that. In fact, we've also heard on Elon Musk's X platform from Mark Cuban, who, of course, was a very prominent surrogate and supporter of Kamala Harris. I interviewed him just over a week ago. He's saying, congrats, Donald Trump, you won fair and square. Again, we haven't called it yet, but that's a very prominent supporter who was out there campaigning for Kamala Harris, going out and saying, congratulating Donald Trump, and by the way, also congratulating Elon Musk as well.
But that's certainly not the message coming from the Kamala Harris campaign. Yeah. Just to be clear, Mark Cuban may be a very, a top supporter of Kamala Harris, but their campaign is still insisting they have a slim path here.
But even they recognize that in kind of going dark tonight or going quiet, that they're opening up all of this sort of airtime and conversation to the real possibility that Donald Trump is going to return as president, particularly given the mathematical path here that we see ahead of us with the blue wall. I mean, there's no way around it. He's had a very impressive night, not only in the Sun Belt, but right through the blue wall states. And so, in not giving any sort of more explanation from the Harris campaign, this is where the conversation's going to go.
And they know that. Look, they made a choice. Kamala Harris not coming out tonight to speak, likely because she didn't really know what to say. I mean, they still want to see the rest of these numbers come in. The last sort of official word from the Kamala Harris campaign is that they are waiting this out. They want to see, every last vote counted in these key states, but they are seeing exactly what we are seeing. This is certainly not the night they wanted and had hoped to have. Are they ready to come out and say that definitively? No.
All right. Former President Trump expected to speak at any moment in West Palm Beach. We'll go there just as soon as he begins talking. We'll be right back after the break, and we'll see you.
Your voice, your vote. Election Night 2024. Live from New York City. Here again, David Muir.
Now about 20 minutes before 2 a.m. in the East here, you're looking at the path to 270. Kamala Harris with 194 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 246. On the precipice of perhaps another presidency if and when Pennsylvania is called. That is, as we've been saying, the battleground of all battlegrounds. Really, both campaigns desperately needed a win in Pennsylvania. Our decision desk not ready to call that state. There is still outstanding vote, and so let's get over to Rick Klein. That path is still extremely narrow for Kamala Harris, and if she were able to pull it off in Pennsylvania, she'd also then need Michigan and Wisconsin as well, where she's trailing in both states at this hour,
yeah,
too.
That's exactly right. We're up to 94% of the vote in Pennsylvania, and we've gotten a lot more vote in Philadelphia, as well as some additional estimates. We think there's actually maybe as few as 30,000 additional early by mail votes still out there to be counted. And right now, with the outstanding vote in Philadelphia estimate, even if she won every single one of those votes, as well as all the votes in Delaware County, in Chester County, Montgomery County, I mean, you'd have to run up enormous margins to begin to close this gap. So all the votes are going to be counted. Our decision desk is looking at the data, being very careful with any kind of a projection. But this is a very large lead this late in the evening. Michigan is a little bit of a different story, just because we are waiting on so much vote still out of Wayne County, Detroit, Dearborn, the 600,000 outstanding votes. You can see something coming together there. I think it's even a little more possible if you look at Wisconsin, although, again, we have so much of the vote in, it becomes hard to make up this margin. Pennsylvania, though, to me at this hour, looks like the steepest climb of the three. And just to give you a sense, that's 19 electoral votes. That would put him at 265. The reason that it isn't quite 270, Alaska, where polls have, I believe, just closed pretty recently. They're going to take a while to count. There's also one electoral vote that has not been awarded in Nebraska that usually favors Republicans, and one in Maine. So you add those 5 together to the 19, and you get to 270 electoral votes.
Got it. But those haven't been called.
They have not been called.
Alaska, and obviously Pennsylvania hasn't been called either, just because of the extraordinary care that our decision desk is taking with the votes outstanding. John Karl, any new reporting from the Trump campaign?
Thanks. Waiting on him to come out to deliver what will be a victory speech. I mean, he's gonna declare victory. This, according, again, to one of his top advisors.
So obviously, we just have to make it clear that we haven't called it yet.
We
but
haven't
we will
called
definitely
it.
listen in, and you know, that is the direction that this race is absolutely taking. And no matter how you look at this is a major night for Donald Trump across the map, through all of the battlegrounds, even the ones that haven't been called yet. The turnout has been extraordinary for Donald Trump. And not only that, the effect it's had down ballot, immediately down ballot in the key Senate races, which will then, should Donald Trump return to the White House, he'll have not only just the majority of the Senate, but quite possibly a significant majority.
Yeah, he could have a significant majority in the Senate, David. This is already sort of the outlook for the Senate right now. Republicans expected to take the majority. They've netted the 2 seats that they need to. Let's go back to the nationwide map. I'm going to highlight the states that will ultimately determine how big this majority is for Republicans. And just a reminder here, these blue walls where we're seeing former President Donald Trump still have the lead in every single one. The Republican also still leading over the Democratic candidates in all 3 of these states. So, yes, it becomes a question of not whether or not they have the majority, but simply just by how much.
That's pretty extraordinary. John Tester also in Montana.
John Tester in Montana, the last statewide Democrat in Montana. Take a look here. John Tester, 47%. Sheehy at 51%. He's leading by 7,000 votes. Still only about 31% of the vote in right now, so we're still waiting for a lot of this to come in. But again, this goes back to a lot of people moving into the state of Montana, even though John Tester, a third-generation farmer, Montana through and through. A question of whether or not that even really matters. Tim Sheehy, not even from this state at all, but still appealing to voters here clearly, and also potentially getting a boost maybe by former President Donald Trump.
Also getting a boost, Sam Brown, it would appear. And again, the vote hasn't fully counted, obviously, in Nevada. It's still early, but he's doing much better than the polls leading into Election Day had him up against Jackie Rosen.
Yes, and he has been campaigning out there with former President Donald Trump. I was just in the state of Nevada with the former president and Sam Brown, both together campaigning. Take a look at this. Jackie Rosen, 47%. You have Sam Brown. He's only ahead by a little bit here, 636 votes, 71% of the vote currently in. But yes, once again, David.
Well, and in Arizona, perhaps the one Republican candidate who was most loyal to Donald Trump with her rhetoric and sticking by him and not conceding in her own race for governor a couple of years back, she might be the only one, perhaps at this point, that it looks like might not be carried with this Trump wave, if that's what it is that we're witnessing here tonight. And
I think more than any other Senate candidate, I think Kari Lake was really hoping to ride on the coattails of former President Donald Trump in this state. She was driving around this state in a campaign bus with her face, Donald Trump's face next to it. She basically has been pitching herself along with the former president. Yes, this is Kari Lake, who obviously still has not conceded the election that she lost against Democrat Katie Hobbs in this state, like former President Donald Trump, who never conceded his own race in 2020. But this is where we are starting to see the split ticket voting here. Ruben Gallego, he's up by 109,000 votes, and you have Donald Trump ahead by 16,000 in this state.
Okay, two quick questions. Yeah, real quick, John, just because
veterans,
I want to.
By the way, all military. We've got Sheehy, right? We've got Sam Brown, who was a
Afghanistan vet, right?
Yeah,
Purple Heart.
Purple Heart, horribly wounded.
And a roadside, right?
With burns by a roadside bomb. I think he'd only been there about 4 months and was badly wounded. But again, they don't know him very well. But these are the people who've gotten, except for Gallego. But he also a combat veteran. A lot of those, about 100 veterans.
And I was just going to say, Democrats right now are looking at one thing, especially tonight, where they still are clinging to hope, and that is the House. As Rachel just walked us through a little while ago, we're probably not going to know who controls the House for maybe, it might even be a couple of weeks till the final results in California, which can take a long time. But I talked to Hakeem Jeffries yesterday, and I asked him, do you see a scenario where Donald Trump could get elected president and you could still become Speaker of the House? And he said, absolutely. I see it's so close. It's on such a knife's edge, the House. So we don't know what's going to happen. We haven't declared the presidency yet either. But the House is very much still in play. It's either going to be Democrat takeover, a Speaker Jeffries, or it's going to be the narrowest of narrow majorities for the Republicans.
And those are two very different scenarios.
Of course.
If you have Speaker Mike Johnson, you have a Republican Senate, not just by one or two, but possibly by several Senate seats, and Donald Trump in the White House. That's quite something. It's very different from Hakeem Jeffries suddenly playing the role that Speaker Pelosi played for a few years of a sort of a check and balance between Congress and the White House.
And that's what you're hearing from Democrats. That's the place. That's the place that can be the bulwark against a full Republican takeover, but we may not know for a while.
Yeah, and of course we still haven't called the biggest race of the night. I do want to ask, we are waiting to hear from Donald Trump. When he takes the stage, we'll go out to him. I want to take this back to Kate Shaw and to Dan Abrams, our legal team back here, because one of the other questions always with the presidential election is the Supreme Court. The makeup of the court. Donald Trump had a profound impact on the makeup of the court during his first presidency. If he's declared the new president of the United States, how many justices are we looking at potentially retiring, and what's his opportunity moving forward if he's the next president to shape the court even further?
Well, I would expect that Justices Thomas and Alito would be at the top of the list, likely to leave the bench during Trump's second term, if in fact he's going to have one. And that would mean they'd be replaced by much younger justices. And so that doesn't change the composition of the court, but it cements for many decades a very conservative supermajority. And then, of course, if one of the Democrats needs to leave the court for health reasons or others, you go from a 6-3 to a 7-2 conservative supermajority, which is an enormous difference. So I think all of that is obviously on the line.
And if he's declared the next president, Dan Abrams, does Jack Smith go away? Does the federal prosecution goes right away?
Absolutely. Jack Smith's going to get fired, done, those prosecutions are over. The more interesting question is going to be the two local prosecutions, right? The one in New York, where he's already been convicted, there's a sentencing scheduled for the end of November. Think about that. The president-elect would be sentenced for a New York State crime at the end of November. It is hard to imagine a judge even considering, at that point, jail time. The Georgia case would at the very least get delayed until 2029, if disappear altogether. Just one other point on the Supreme Court, which is, remember, this is why the Senate becomes so important. And it's a follow-up a little bit on something that Chris Christie said earlier. The more you get in terms of the majority in the Senate, the more autonomy that Donald Trump is going to have in who he picks, right? I mean, he might pick someone who some Republicans even have concerns about. But if you don't have enough Republicans to object to that, he's really going to be able to pick anyone that he wants. So the Senate becomes very important with regard to what happens with the Supreme Court moving forward.
All right, Dan Abrams, Kate Shaw, thank you. We're going to go to break, a very quick break. The moment we hear from the former president, we'll come right back to you. Stay tuned. Welcome back. ABC News Live coverage. We're expecting to hear from former President Donald Trump at any moment in West Palm Beach, Florida, where a crowd has gathered at the Palm Beach Convention Center, with Johnson also there among the crowd. Whit?
Yeah, David, the crowd is cheering very loudly. That's because some other networks have projected the race for Donald Trump. Of course, we are still waiting on a few states to come through, but this is the cheering that we're hearing in the crowd, just adding to the anticipation of the former president, who they expect to be the new president once again, to come in here and speak. We did see the Secret Service peeking through the curtains, checking out the room, but as far as we're told, the doors are still open as they're letting people out, and the big signal will be when those doors close that it's likely that Trump would come speak to this crowd. But I'm also thinking about some of the things that we heard in the closing message down the stretch here, because I spoke to a lot of different Trump supporters at some of these different events, and most of them focused on the top two issues that we heard over and over again: the economy and immigration. And one of the things that we heard from Trump on the campaign trail, starting all of these rallies, is he would ask this question: are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And thousands of his supporters would yell no. And that was really the message that they were trying to hammer home down the stretch, that Kamala Harris and the Biden administration broke it, but Donald Trump can fix it. And we have to say, like, we've been talking to, I mean, he's been running for president for nearly a decade now, and we've seen him take over the Republican Party and really transform this MAGA movement. And the crowds here are much different than they were in 2020. They're different than they were in 2016. They're younger. They are more diverse. Despite what a lot of critics thought, that he wouldn't be able to bring together this diverse crowd, we are certainly seeing this in this room tonight. We've been seeing it at the rallies lately. So again, we're still waiting for some information on when exactly former President Trump is going to speak. But there's a lot of anticipation, a lot of energy and excitement in this room, David.
All right, Whit, we really appreciate it. We'll come right back to you as soon as we hear from the former president. I want to get right back over to Rick at the big board here, because it's all, you know, obviously this hinges on Pennsylvania here being called. I know we're being extremely careful. Can you show us again where the outstanding vote is? Maybe that other map that you have that shows sort of the dots where there's any blue or any red left on the map?
Yeah, 188,000 votes are separating the two candidates, and really the only place you're going to find any significant vote at this hour is Philadelphia and some of its immediate suburbs. But we've seen these numbers shrink as the night has gone on, and that's what the difficulty is right now. We're looking right now, we think we've got about 3/4 of the mail vote, 86% of the election day vote. So even if this number's right, and that's probably a little bit high right now in terms of the estimated remaining, that's not really nearly enough to begin to make up that gap. And if you look even in the other populous counties here, 44,000 estimated votes in a 55-45 Trump county. If you assume they go the same way, 60-40 county with about 65,000. I mean, look, you could add this up and slice and dice. You've got to really you'd have to have a perfect inside straight at this point for the Harris campaign to catch up to a margin that big.
You could easily see some narrowing, but not narrowing by.
Correct. It almost certainly will narrow, and that's what the Harris team is pointing to. But it's very hard to see how any of these numbers are going to break in a way that overcomes a deficit like that. So our team's being cautious about it because the stakes are so high, and that's the prudent thing to do. Everyone's vote should count. And of course, that doesn't account for Michigan, where there's a lot more votes still outstanding, but a larger margin of more than 250,000, and Wisconsin, where there's 120,000 that's separating the candidates.
Did the Trump team, and there'd be a number of things to look back at both of these campaigns. One of the things, though, did they flip the script on early voting, getting the early vote up, and then sending people out on Election Day as well, and forcing the Democrats really to try, and we heard it from Donna Brazil, you have to really overperform in the urban areas. You have to overperform in Detroit, in Philadelphia, in the collar counties. You have to overperform in Madison, in all these battleground states in the key urban areas. It really put the Democrats on defense come Election Day to try to catch up with the Republican turnout for a change. And I know that was Donald Trump driven, because 4 years ago he said don't vote early, and might have hurt himself back then by doing that. But tonight this election, it seems, by really encouraging the early vote and then continuing to push to get people out to the polls, that was clearly a strategy that worked much better for Donald Trump this go around.
Yeah, 4 years ago, it's been called political malpractice, what he did, to downplay and actively urge his supporters not to vote early, especially during COVID, when it was made easier to vote in so many states, and there was a record turnout. More than 100 million people voted early, and that meant that Republicans went into election night. 44% of the electorate early was estimated to be Democratic, 34% Republican. The difference coming into today, instead of a 10-point gap to make up on Election Day, they only had to make up a 2-point gap. So early voting was no doubt a major part of this strategy. And yes, Donald Trump reluctantly and sometimes contradicting himself inside the same sentence embraced early voting in a way that Republicans took advantage of. And we were told by the Democrats, look, don't worry about it. We've got our own ground game. We're gonna overcome that. That does not appear to be the case tonight in the major battlegrounds where we have vote in.
I want to bring this to Terry, because first of all, this time Donald Trump embraced early voting, right? And the fact that the Democrats were then on defense come Election Day to try to run up the total, to run up the score in these urban areas. Have the Democrats, one of the things in the postmortem, I think, for both of these campaigns, but certainly for the Democrats, will be you can't just count on the urban areas. You've got to connect with rural America, with working class America. You can't win these races. You showed the evolution of the electoral map over several presidential cycles. Moving forward, the Democratic Party is going to have to figure that out somehow, are they not?
This is a moment of truth for Democrats. 10 years ago, what was it, a little bit longer, that Democrats thought demography is destiny, and they were the natural party of government because America is becoming more diverse. There'll be a lower share of white voters. And it turns out that's completely wrong. You have to talk to people, meet their needs, and answer their questions. And that includes rural voters as well. And it includes, voters that for whatever reason have bought into what Donald Trump stands for, which is the end of the ruling establishment, not just in government, but in all kinds of institutions, including the media. People like that.
Yeah, and some of it might be that, the institutions, but some of it's just, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? I felt like my money went further. There are a lot of people, I think, hurting in the country, even if they see the stock market, 401ks going up, or interest rates finally coming back down. I do think that this is what Martha and I hear when we're out in the country, that the people they want to feel like they've been heard. And so, yes, I think.
And Donald Trump does say, I can help you stabilize and get rich. But he says a lot more than that. He says, let's go get them.
Yeah, very true, Terry. Okay, so we're waiting on Pennsylvania. We're waiting on former President Donald Trump to take the stage here in Florida. John Santucci, who has reported on Trump for some time for ABC. John, talk to us a little bit about some of the people that you recognize there in the crowd, some of the people who certainly were helping Donald Trump. They were the architects of this moment, this what appears to be a very real comeback. Who do you see there in the room?
Well, so far, David, it's interesting. So I've seen some of the junior level campaign staff that have been working with the former president. I haven't seen senior staff just yet. But David, just off the stage is a little seating area, if you can believe it, somewhere up there. And so far, we've seen former White House press secretary Sarah Sanders, of course, Donald Trump's former White House press secretary, now the governor of Arkansas, obviously someone who was with Donald Trump all throughout his years at the White House, David, and was campaigning with Donald Trump in just the last couple of days on the trail. I've also spotted South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. We know another person that has been with Donald Trump on the trail. And David, also earlier tonight, I actually laid eyes on Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's friend of decades, his one-time attorney that dealt with so many matters that were in the White House. And we know, of course, David, coming into this cycle, it's been a different legal team. Our colleague Catherine Falders actually spotted moments ago members of Donald Trump's current legal defense team. I know we were talking earlier with Dan Abrams about some of those cases. That sentencing Dan mentioned just a couple of weeks away for the Manhattan DA's case. A question, though, about how soon Donald Trump would do something about the special counsel's cases, David. As people have been pointing out to me, the first thing they can't wait, as one person said to me, can't wait for Donald Trump to do is fire special counsel Jack Smith. We know from Donald Trump's own words, David, that would be the first thing he would do within 2 seconds of taking the oath of office, David.
Let's stick with this live picture and bring Pierre Thomas and Aaron Katersky into this conversation. Pierre's our Chief Justice Correspondent, as many of you at home know. Aaron Katersky, our Chief Investigative Correspondent. Pierre, you heard the John Santucci report there, and it's not a surprise that getting rid of Jack Smith would be one of the first actions. And Aaron Katersky, you can speak to the felony charges and convictions here on the local level here in New York City. Pierre, let's start with you and what your sources within sort of the justice community make of sort of the evolution of this evening.
Well, David, if this holds up, and it looks like it will, Donald Trump is about to become the most powerful president in modern history, primarily because of the fact that the Justice Department will be completely at his beck and call. The Supreme Court basically made that clear. And think about this. The FBI Director, Chris Wray, is probably on borrowed time as we speak. He'll be gone, more than likely. And he will have the ability to install, after Senate approval, a new FBI director. That person carries extraordinary power to investigate. And at the end of the day, in terms of the DOJ, the president, because of that Supreme Court ruling, the Supreme Court basically said it's okay for the president to weigh in at DOJ about whatever he chooses to. And all these different guidelines that the Justice Department has set up in terms of the president should not weigh in on criminal cases and all these things, that is likely to potentially be null and void.
Aaron?
And David, the former president scheduled to be sentenced November 26th here in New York after he was convicted of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. His attorneys who were there with him in Florida successfully delayed that sentencing twice. That's looking like a pretty prescient decision because it's hard to imagine now Judge Juan Merchan sentencing him to anything that would represent a meaningful sentence for that felony conviction. The sentencing can go forward, but undoubtedly the judge will be influenced by these new circumstances.
A lot of people watching the developments as they unfold tonight. Aaron, Pierre, our thanks to you both as well. Any new numbers from Pennsylvania, Rick?